What did your workplace do that made you realize you had to run? I had a wall of crazy where the CEO wanted to spend $20K on cool and edgy stuff for the office, and staff could make suggestions. He wanted things like slides, beanbags, napping pods, stuff like that. The project was scrapped when the top suggestions ended up being desks, chairs, working heating, working Wi-Fi, and health insurance. Hearing our CEO say, compensation is only one part of the employment experience, during an earnings call when he was answering complaints about underpaying his employees after we had reported record profits. I learned at an internship that we work hard and play hard means that we want you to work 75-hour weeks, but sometimes we'll put donuts in the break room. If there are any leftovers from the client meetings, that is. Not my company, but a company from a neighboring building. They had an entire area devoted to foosball, pinball, billiards, console gaming, and video key booths on the ground floor, and it was clearly visible because of the glass windows on street level. Oddly enough, nobody ever used that floor, and the place was almost always empty save for a few people who used the internet kiosks. When I learned a friend worked there, I asked why nobody would want to take the opportunity to use the awesome-looking recreational facility, and he told me that people who do use the facility often found it used against them during performance evaluations, even when their use wasn't excessive at all. After a while, word got around and they started avoiding the place altogether. The irony is that their recruitment ads always touted a culture of work hard, play hard. The place I'm just about to leave, handed in my notice last week, bought a pool table for the breakout space earlier in the year. It's horrible and cheap and not fun to play on anyway. But I've seen colleagues get ushered back to their desks partway through a game at 12:59 because they were in danger of overstaying their lunch break. They always make sure to show potential new hires that they have it, though. They also bought an Xbox with no games, and then complained about wasting money because nobody was using it. Why is nobody having fun? I specifically requested it. Although this is worse than Holt, because they'll actively hound and punish you for doing the thing they're telling you to do as well. Ugh. Oh, we have a great culture, lots of team lunches and drinks. When I started, our boss had banned the social club, birthday celebrations, or recognition of birthdays, strictly no cake, taken away the Christmas party, the Christmas break period, and tried to stop people talking to each other. All the while, she'd take every second day off and have long weekends every weekend. We had maybe 3 team lunches in the time that I was there, and she always made sure to tell us that we wouldn't be paid for anything over our lunch break, even though she came too. We had to submit manual timesheet corrections to remove the amount we took. It's like, okay, fair enough, but can't you just let it slide? It's not your money, and we're talking about maybe 20 minutes here. A client also invited me to their Christmas party due to our close relationship and my good work on their files, and my boss called them and told them I wasn't allowed to go. She told me it was because she was concerned I might reflect badly on the department. Ironic, really. Lush, when we couldn't say bathroom on the shop floor and instead had to ask the manager for serenity. I think I'd just go around yelling, "Serenity, now!" I worked at the B&Q and one of my colleagues was stabbed 30 times by a customer. I was completely shaken. The next morning we were taken into a big room and made to sign a document saying we wouldn't sue them. If we didn't sign, we'd lose our jobs. Also, that colleague was stabbed only a month after they got rid of our security guard to save money. This happened a couple of weeks ago, when HR sent out an email to management, excluding me and about 2 other people, telling them to fraudulently leave good reviews on Glassdoor and to coerce others to do the same. I'll refrain from mentioning the company at this time, however it looks like this is a common issue and there needs to be a better way to call this out. Our CEO sent out an internal email whining about people posting bad reviews on Glassdoor. He said that we should keep our feedback in-house. Yeah, guy, you're cutting every department past the bone to cut costs to raise share prices so you can sell the company and make 8 figures when your options vest. Clearly, you're going to care about my criticism of your strategy. I was at a fast casual restaurant for a couple of months and the GM always talked about the culture. You know what's a great culture? When the morning shift and night shift have their daily screaming matches over crap that they each accused the other one of needing to do. It was impressive just how incompetent the entire company was from ownership down. Not me, but my husband worked for 2 weeks for a family-owned and operated business that touted how important family was and that they were all one happy family. My husband was on his way to drop our, at the time, 2-year-old son off at daycare before work when our son threw up all over himself. Husband called his employer to tell them what happened and that he needed to take his son home and clean him up, but he'd be in ASAP. His manager told him he needed to get his priorities straight. I can say I'm proud of my husband for responding with, "Yeah, you know what? You're right. I won't be back in at all." He was still working part-time at his previous job, where they'd been sad that he was leaving, so he called them and told them to put him back on the schedule full-time. That family business is currently in the process of liquidating assets before going out of business, and I cackle every time I drive past it. Last year I was working as a subcontractor and I was assigned a new place of work. Just 2 weeks after I started, the new boss wanted to hire me. He put down the contract where, compared to my current contract, pay was down 25%, average weekly hours went up by 20%, vacation days went down by 10%, and I wouldn't have a company car for personal use anymore. Before he actually handed me the contract to read, he said, "I'll only make you this offer once, but it's only valid if you change all of your pictures on your social media and you sell your car. It's too flashy for our company." How about no? This is for a flight centre headquartered in Brisbane, Australia, but they're a global company trading under many names. I think it's Liberty Travel in the States. Anyway, everything about the company internally screams cringe. Everyone treats the CEO like a frickin' god. His name is Screw, and when he takes a selfie, it's called a scroofy. Ugh. And they opened a foreign exchange ATM at the head office that they called the Scrutm, which sounds like scrotum if you ask me. It's frickin' ridiculous. When my art director wanted to get a pro bono poster on verbal abuse done faster by screaming at the designer. When I went to firm drinks in a public bar and the firm's fun committee handed out song sheets and a choir of employees led by a bad guitarist sang a song about how great the firm was to the tune of "'Cause I'm Happy." We were expected to sing along. It was at that moment I realized I was in a cult. When I went to my first corporate managers rally when I worked at Domino's, I thought this would be a cool, free catered lunch and it counted as a workday. Then they started the rally with the company cheer. I'm like, what the frick, we're adults. Why are we cheering? I looked around and way too many people were into this cheer. I realized that job wasn't going to be the one for me. When I had to phone around to the corporation leaders to find out why none of the mechanics I'd interviewed were hired, the mechanics had all come from all over the country and some had waited patiently for months to know if they got the job or not. Turned out the CEO had changed his mind and wanted me to take care of all mechanic work. I was the factory manager. But they knew I'd be upset, so neither he, HR, or the COO wanted to be the one to tell me. I worked at this business that was really keen on telling everyone that they were like a family and chastising me for not going to company parties and stuff, but that also refused to pay overtime and expected me to work late 2 or 3 times a week, as well as doing a 14-hour day twice a month for stocktake and end of month. Apparently, because we're a family, we're all expected to chip in on the big days, except it was literally just us bottom-tier workers who had to stay late. I quit that place and never looked back. Yes, it would appear that "we're like a family" is one of the biggest red flags one can look out for in the working world. Although I suppose "we're a job, you come here, conduct a service, and are compensated for said service" doesn't quite have the same whimsical note. I worked for a company that prides itself on being in the top 100 places to work in the US. They brought the hospital I was working for while I was doing IT work there. For a year, they let me stay at the current hospital I was working at with a team for countless hours getting ready to switch out IT infrastructure over to match the place's new software. We changed out all 900 computers at our location, and after that was done, I was then told that in the next few months I'd have to commute to the main campus to keep my job, a drive that for me was over 5 hours round trip. They didn't offer me to transfer or even pay compensation for driving there. I was literally forced to quit at that point, all because a new manager took over on the new fiscal year and decided that the IT department I was in needed to all be at the main campus. When our university's VP explained that the goal of every tenured faculty member was to write enough grants to pay our salaries and replace us with TAs. Every semester, ideally every undergrad class. Also, would be under a hiring freeze but could feel free to be creative and use temporary grant money to hire tenured faculty. Also, would all be paying an extra $250 a year in parking fees to fund a new student parking lot. Dear Lord, I was glad I'd already decided to leave. Bought out by an equity group. The new president on call with thousands of employees says, We have two kinds of employees, those that work a tremendous number of hours and those that should find another company to work for. My last job was an independent school in the UK, you know, the wealthy sort. During a period of streamlining, the entire faculty were called into a hall and told in upbeat terms that we were struggling to make ends meet. Salaries were too high, perks were too abundant, and spending was unsustainable. For clarity, salaries weren't too high and perks were practically non-existent. Spending was definitely unsustainable, however, in part because they were spending hundreds of thousands redesigning the senior staff offices to hide all the cabling and install proper wood paneling. So then they started listing off perks and assigning them a value. For example, free parking. Well, no crap, the school has a lot of land and isn't in a city. Why would you charge? Secondly, nice surroundings. Well again, no crap, that's part of your marketing appeal. Long holidays? Nice try, but I work all holiday. They didn't even get as far as telling me what they planned to do with my job and pay. I was gone in less than 3 months. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My district manager told me to talk my key holder out of going back to college. Mind you, she wanted to be a doctor. They were proud that nobody had degrees. That's fine, but I'm not working more than 45 hours a week and mandatory holidays just to sell some shoes. The loyalty my coworkers had was so cringy. They didn't understand how we were being taken advantage of because we didn't get our degrees. Anyway, F you, going back to school was the best decision I've made. We, the management team, spent months working with a business coach trying to collectively come up with meaningful core values. We devoted a ton of time to it and really tried to decide which directions we wanted to take the company culture. Everybody agreed on teamwork, reliability, a couple of others that I can't remember now, and then one day the owner came in and called a meeting. He sat us down in the boardroom and told us he spent all weekend brainstorming and had decided on the core values. They were meaningful, ownership, neighborhood, engagement, you. Does anybody see what that spells? He literally just wanted it to be money and came up with words that sort of worked the way you do in elementary school writing your name poem. He rebranded the entire company from t-shirts with giant first letters and small letters for the rest of the word, straight down the arms, to plaques, wraps on the cars, fricking everything. And that's when we all knew it was going to get bad. Money's great, but it was mortifying walking and driving around with that plastered everywhere. I knew what I was in for when I started actually working on the floor and management was nowhere to be found. I work in the complaints department and we don't have a lot of managers. I had a belligerent customer demand a manager for his issue. I was told management were all busy, but to tell him one would give him a call back at 4. All day I asked who was calling him back at 4 and told it would be sorted. At 3:55 I was told I have to call him back. He wasn't best pleased. I worked at a popular travel stop/oversized gas station. It's practically a state icon. They're famous for their good wages for a low-income job. There's a huge sign over every entry with the starting wages around $13 per hour in a state where minimum wage is $7.25. Customers think it's a great place to work. They literally fired a girl for having a stroke. We treat our employees like family. Ignores harassment claims, hires from outside the company, refuses to give out decent pay, will write you up for doing overtime, but the CEO just bought himself a new BMW. I hate that place. When I took a 40% pay cut with no change in workload by being moved to salary. I worked at an animal hospital that wanted to be, and probably is to some, the best hospital in the city. Had the most modern equipment, looked incredibly nice inside, good Yelp ratings, and on top of that, we were told during hiring that we were a huge family and everyone loved each other. This could not be more wrong. This place was the epitome of superficial. The turnaround rate was out of control and people absolutely hated each other. The pay was horrible, even though we charged double the amount of any other hospital for our extensive care. I gave management some credit for their effort, but it was more about hiding issues instead of addressing them. We couldn't talk about our concerns because it was considered gossip, and people were fired frequently for this. And apparently they've now put audio recorders throughout the hospital to listen in on employees' conversations. I honestly don't know how anyone still works there. We had a problem with the client, and the boss dumped all of the blame on a 24-year-old woman who was basically his most loyal employee. He made her cry in front of the client, as if that would somehow help save the relationship. Treat every dollar like it was your own. Yeah, right after we went well over targets for the entire year and then was told a Christmas party wasn't financially viable because of expenses. It's one of the biggest hospitality groups in Australia, by the way. See, America, you may have the market cornered in blatant employee mistreatment in the first world, but the rest of us are catching up to you and we'll get there. I'm in management and we just got the message that bonuses for the last financial year were severely cut across the business, probably going to receive 30% of our total potential at best. Then attended our financial end-of-year results meeting the next day to be told that net profits were 18% up, nearly $1 billion total, and the best performance in years, all thanks to us. Okay, planning on leaving now. This is what the woman who interviewed me said. Here at Cheapskate Architects, we don't often do all-nighters for our customers, but when we do, it's a real pizza party. Also, we don't pay overtime, we do it for the love. And your wage is $22K even though you're an architect. And also, I won't be there because I'm HR management, because I'm married to the director. Yes, we need an HR department even though there's 3 employees. A co-worker was forced to work while her mother was dying in hospice. Mum dies, she quits, and they escort her off the premises like a criminal. When my boss planned an office day trip to the car show and brewery, and then only invited the guys in the office. Even worse, when one of the women said we should all go, he said, No, but why don't you girls have a spa day instead? He also put on a hella racist accent whenever he talked about his many Asian clients. Obviously, there were all other issues, but those 2 stand out. Go F yourself, Tony. They changed the title of the receptionist to Director of First Impressions. For everyone asking, it's a tiny company in the Midwest. At Big W here in Australia, think Walmart but no weapons, they changed the door greeter title to Customer Champion. Stupidest frickin' thing I've ever heard, and all the managers thought it was genius. When I was asked to do the deed with a potential client, at the time I was in my early 20s. I'm female. Looking back, I realized that I had more going on looks-wise than I knew back then. This was decades ago. My boss, the business owner, always told us that he thought of the office as being one big, you've guessed it, family. He also referred to the female employees as his girls. A new client was coming into the office. My boss called me into his office and told me he was going to give me the company credit card so I could take the potential new client out for dinner and drinks. He told me to sleep with him. We need this client if everyone wants to get paid. Nice added pressure. I said no, and the next day I quit. A couple of months earlier, my boss had invited me over to his house for dinner with his family and to swim in his pool because he said he knew how hard I'd been working. I was a little surprised that he had finally noticed and thought it was kind that he wanted to do something nice for me. I got there, and his wife and kids are gone, but there's a 25-year-old guy in his pool, the son of a client who just got out of the army. He told me he was trying to fix me up on a date because I needed to get out more. Like an idiot, I believed him. It wasn't until later I realized he was hoping I'd show more interest in the guy. I found out later that he'd asked all of the female employees at one point to sleep with clients. The secretary actually did. She was a young, single mum and was worried she'd be fired if she said no. After I quit, she told me she wished she had the option to quit. I didn't realize what she was saying until we talked later. At the time, this guy's daughter was around 4 years old. When I quit, I asked him how old would his daughter have to be before he asked her to sleep with clients. I thought he was going to hit me. I have 1,000 stories about working at that place. The guy was an unethical idiot. A dangerous combination. But I learned a lot about how to not run a business from him. I've owned my own business for 30 years now. I've never asked an employee to sleep with clients, or even go out for drinks. I had the benefit of growing up in a family with money. I wasn't earning much and would probably not have been able to quit and move on without the assistance from my parents. I never told them what happened. When I told my dad I quit, he was happy. Oh, you hated that place. Now that I'm older and times have changed, I would know what to do. I'd hope he'd have faced consequences. Today, this isn't considered a regular part of business. The Me Too movement wasn't really a thing back then. Nobody really cared. This was the only time I was directly asked to sleep with a client, but not the only time I faced unwanted attention at work. It was so common for me and my friends that when we pushed back against it, we felt like we were really on the leading edge of changing work environments for women. I guess we were, but sad that we needed to be. I certainly hoped women didn't face this anymore, but the recent news set me straight on that. I worked at Outback. The amount of team meetings and mandatory enthusiasm was ridiculous. I was given the chance to backpack across Europe with some friends for 3 weeks one summer. I told my manager and she goes, 3 weeks? I don't know, you'll have to work really hard up until then and I'll let you know if you can take that time off. I straight up told her, it's not if you let me go, it's if you still let me work here when I get back. Yeah, when I got back, I immediately started looking for new jobs. When attending a management retreat and was pressured into buying charity raffle tickets that I couldn't afford, $20. The 2 people who won before me donated their winnings to the same charity they bought the raffle tickets from. They were middle management who made more than $100K each and they were trying to look really good. I made $32K with a young daughter. I won a drawing of $400. I literally had nausea for 2 days trying to figure out how I was going to pay my bills after my job had just moved the goalposts on some sales performance bonuses I had coming my way, dropping it effectively from $1,000 to $200. And now I'm the butthole who's going to keep the money that I won. I guess I'm not a team player. As a bonus, this was 4 hours drive from home, had an overnight stay, and one of those middle management jerks, in an example of what should be on or off the clock, said we shouldn't be paid for the drive to the retreat. Frick you. I was on the clock from the time I left Friday until I got home on Sunday. If you're forcing me to be somewhere as part of my job, it's all on the clock. My district manager didn't like that, and I was already looking for the door.
To the doctors of Reddit, what is it like when you have a doctor's appointment? I avoid disclosing I'm a doctor unless specifically asked what I do for work. I think I'm better taken care of when the doc/team is most comfortable and working in their routine. Difficult and demanding patients who request special treatment often have worse outcomes. I don't want to be one of them. I completely agree. I never tell them I'm a doctor. Same thing when I take my kids to a pediatrician. I just want to be treated like a regular patient. Only exception was when I broke my hand and needed it operated on ASAP, not 10 days later. Being an ER resident, I always wonder which one of my co-residents is working in the emergency department as I drive home from a shift, knowing if something were to happen, they would be checking my rectal tone in front of all my coworkers. And then I think about how big their hands are. With my mom, it was like this. Mom, I think I have basal cell carcinoma on my back, but I can't see it quite clearly. Derm, you do have basal cell carcinoma. Good job. Went to student health as a med student. Attending I worked with the week before does my PAP. With the resident, he asked, I said yes. Kept quizzing me. What am I looking for? What does it mean if the PAP is positive? Etc. I'm getting questions right, but he's being real weird about it. Realized in parking lot after appointment, he was asking the resident, not me. Rotate with said resident a few months later. Bad. Because I can see all the shortcuts they're taking and I'm aware of the examination they should be doing but aren't. Edit, I should clarify, because I'm afraid I might have given the wrong impression. Most physicians I've met seem to know what they're about, but it's easy to spot areas where you would have done something differently and the negative examples always stick out more than the positive. The example I was thinking of was this. I didn't learn I had scoliosis until my first week of medical school. It's mild, as scoliosis goes, but I have back and/or neck pain every day. So, I went to a local MD to get checked out and see if I should be worried. I wait for 2 hours to get in. Said MD takes a cursory history, doesn't ask any of the right questions, family history of this condition, when did it start, has it worsened, etc., and in the physical exam, barely touches my back. I knew the tests they needed to do and the questions she should have asked because I was in medical school. I was there for her experience and advice. I got neither. A better doctor, or more realistically, one with more time to see patients, would have said, hey, I don't know anything about scoliosis. You need to see someone who does. Or hey, actually knowing how to deal with a reasonably common condition would have been nice, I suppose, but I don't know, I'm a lowly resident. Edit 2. Whoa, never had this many notifications before. To answer a few questions, number 1, this does not qualify as professional medical advice. If you have a medical problem, you should go see your doctor in the meat space. If you do have scoliosis, I would look around for a doctor who A, is an MD/DO with an orthopedics background, whether as an actual orthopod or sports med, or B, is a practicing DO, you'll have to Google it, who does OMT and is familiar with scoliosis. Just my 2 cents. Opinions on chiropractors vary wildly in the medical community, and I won't get into that here because frankly, I'm not informed enough to comment. Number 2. Several people have asked how this uppity med student knew anything in his first week of med school. Fair question. I was told I had scoliosis in the first week of med school. It was 6 months to a year before I got it checked out. Never had time to do anything those first 2 years, especially not go to the doctor. Number 3. As others have pointed out, never be afraid to seek a second opinion. Doctors are human, and even hyper-educated humans make mistakes. Not only that, but frequently, diseases don't present the same way in the same patient every day of the year. Things can be messy in the real world. Complicated diagnoses may take time and may have to work through alternative diagnoses to get to the truth. Male gynecologist here. When I have a patient come in for a PAP, it is always a bit annoying when they leave their underwear on under the gown. I have to step out of the room and wait for them to remove it. When I went in for my first physical in years, I stripped naked under the paper gown. Apparently, guys don't do this. They leave their underwear on. Who knew? My family doc, who is also my best friend, had a good laugh at my expense over this breach in etiquette. He also texted me the night before to let me know he was putting the KY in the fridge for my exam. Not a doctor, but was a medical assistant in an OBGYN practice for a while. We were near a very large medical center, so would regularly get physician patients. My favorite was this physician couple who would come in for pregnancy check-ins and refuse to let me take the woman's blood pressure. The husband would bring his own stethoscope and BP cuff, and they would sit down into this weird, intimate BP-taking ritual that took forever while I just kind of stood off to the side. I told the doc I was working with about it, and she's like, "It's okay. I know them. They're like that. I'll take it again when I see her." So weird. It truly depends on the way you act. Most of the time, I won't tell the doctor that I'm also a doctor unless specifically asked about it or if there is a slip of my tongue about symptoms or any other medical words. Some doctors tend to be not too specific when they know you're a doctor because, quote, "you already know what's happening." Sometimes, even my wife gets the "ask your husband to clarify your questions." I try to have an open mind when I'm the patient because we are trained to think the worst, so there is a lot of cancer in my mind. Currently, I work in a palliative care unit. I have had medical patients and carers, and I would say that it is truly diverse how they react. We are also human and we are sick and vulnerable. The doctor vein can go completely off or go on overdrive. Turning it off is better and less intrusive most of the time. The test results came in. It's bad news. You're not subscribed to Am I the Genius or Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below, and you haven't liked the video either. But it's not too late to turn your life around. Please, subscribe. It's for the better. Just kidding. Thanks for watching. Not a doctor, but whenever my dad, who is a doctor, took me in for an appointment when I was a kid, it was always super awkward because if anything was done even remotely incorrectly, he'd basically do the medical equivalent of the "let me speak to your manager" routine. Which I kind of understand in that context, since it's your kid's health you're talking about and not a freaking expired coupon, but still, made me want to melt through the floor. In my experience, doctors tend to be pretty decent patients when admitted to the hospital. They know the routine, they get to know the nurses, they try not to hassle anyone, they can speak to their own doctors as colleagues, etc. Nurses, on the other hand, feel it is very important for you to know at all times and in every sentence that they are nurses, and they are much better at nursing than you. I will say there was this one instance of a doctor/patient and a hospitalist getting into an argument that was pretty interesting. Basically, doctor/patient disagreed with what the hospitalist was doing and asked if hospitalist had read any of the recent studies which suggested that he, instead, follow a different protocol. Hospitalist was not down with the quote, "let's talk as colleagues," and decided to go full on, "screw you, I'm the only one wearing pants in the room right now." There was a mild argument, but remained incredibly civil. 2 days later, the hospitalist was fired. Doctor/patient's brother, or some other close relation, was the CEO. Nurses tend to thrash. Doctors go for surgically precise cuts. One time, I got a page about a patient who was still having some pain that wasn't relieved with the Tylenol she had specifically requested earlier. So, I ordered Toradol/Ketorolac. For those unfamiliar, Toradol is an NSAID, i.e., the same drug class as Advil/ibuprofen and Aleve/naproxen. The only difference is that it is not available over the counter and it can be administered both orally and parenterally, IV/injection. I get another page like 15 minutes later from the charge nurse about how this patient refused the Toradol because she is a nurse and does not want to be given any, quote, narcotic pain medication. I explained the situation to the charge nurse over the phone and got the feeling that the patient was under the impression that she was being given tramadol, which technically is an opioid, but not one of the good ones by any stretch. A discussion ensued, and despite very clearly explaining what I just wrote about Toradol in both lay and medical language, this nurse just insisted that she was right and vaguely insinuated I was trying to turn her into an addict. Her argument basically devolved into her shouting, "I've been a nurse longer than you've been a doctor, and I know what I'm talking about." I tend to give an honest effort to educate patients, but at some point, you just have to pick your battles. So, she got some naproxen, and I made it clear to the nursing staff that unless things significantly changed, either with her condition or her attitude, I did not want to get any more calls if she was still complaining of pain when the naproxen didn't work as well as she wanted it to. I'm a nurse, and I don't like announcing it when I am being treated medically. My OB knows what I do because I work with her. Sometimes they figure me out if I let some jargon slip. I don't bring it up because I'm an OB nurse, and generally, I have little knowledge about other specialties. I don't want them to leave information out because they assume I know. I also don't want them to feel like I am judging them and the care they give me, and have them act weird around me as a result. I have a doctorate. I visit the medical doctor very infrequently, but after a little initial confusion, my GP once remarked, "Oh, you're a real doctor." Med student. Had to go to the ED and then surgery for appendicitis. Got pimped by the surgeon. Felt bad, man. Edit. Getting pimped as a medical student is when you get grilled by your attending about facts about medicine that often are minutia they only know. Sometimes facts not even relevant to medicine. Even more often, the questions are, quote, read my mind type of questions. Your embarrassment and fear is what causes you to remember these facts, so they're used as a, quote, teaching tool. As a nurse, I could tell precisely which topics individual baby surgeons were traumatized by based on which BS orders and details they obsess over, and I curse whatever attending did that to them every time it becomes my problem. Speaking from both perspectives as a younger primary care physician. As a patient, my appointments are 50% what I'm there for and usually very direct, e.g., I have a sinus infection. It is now thick yellow-green discharge with fevers and present over 10 days. I think I may now need antibiotics. He will take a quick peek, then just give me a script. Then 50% non-related conversation regarding how my practice is going, learning a thing or two about a new specialist practice or tips and tricks of the trade. My doc is a very chill, well-versed, and quite an experienced physician who always teaches me a thing or two. As a physician, I also have multiple physicians as patients. My experience varies by specialty. Family physicians' patients seem more chill and relaxed, and usually drop by with a cup of coffee. Pediatricians who are patients are really fun to be around, but some of them seem to have underlying anxiety and at times fairly demanding. Internists are just so intimidating as patients, especially when older and more experienced, but always teach me a thing or two and force me to stay up to date on my guidelines. I also find specialist medical knowledge are more versed in their specialty. An ophthalmologist, as expected, won't know much about gynecology and PAPs, as their last PAP they did was in med school. Not a doctor, but as the husband of a nurse, it's horrid. My wife and the doctor/nurse practitioner will sit and bat ideas back and forth until they can get my wife to accept the diagnosis as her own idea. I'm a doctor. We make terrible patients because we tend to minimize or rationalize every warning sign. Going for a doctor's appointment basically reminds us that we can also get sick, and since we have the burden of knowledge, we're just hoping we don't find something that'll force a lifestyle change. Otherwise, most times it's been a pretty standard experience in terms of registering, waiting, and being seen for 15 minutes. If you go to someone you know personally, which I actually recommend against, you might get some preferential treatment, but it's mostly the same. Other way around, I'm a nurse and was taking care of a doctor I work with. Awkward. She asked me if she could give a urine sample, and she wasn't in for something I'd usually get one for, but then she made me nervous because she should know that. So I was like, "You're the doctor, you tell me." And she said, "Nope, you're the one calling the shots now." And I was like, "Okay, well, I think we are good with that one then." It was pretty awkward all around, but I work labor and delivery, so we deliver a lot of our own nurses and doctors, which is strange, but also nice. Today I learned that doctors go see other doctors. I thought they healed themselves naturally, like glowy mist thingies oozing out of their bodies and raising up into the air. But I have heard of barbers going to other barbers. My PCP doesn't know I'm a physician. When he asked, I lied about my profession. Not a doctor, but trained first aider for 20 plus years now. Step 1. The precursor. I'd been going blind for months. Not just a little, but my vision, which was corrected to 20/20 normally, was now utter crap even with my glasses on, to the point where I couldn't read text on a monitor. Docs can't figure out what's going on, so I worry for weeks, test after test. Step 2. The night. This was the night I figured out what was wrong with me. I was suddenly nothing but thirsty and peeing. Like, get up every hour and stagger to the back room to empty a full bladder and then chug a quart of water thirsty and peeing. And when I get up in the morning, I realize I need medical attention because I was apparently a diabetic. I then chugged a 2-liter of Dr. Pepper because hyperglycemia is a lot less lethal in the short term than hypoglycemia. Didn't know if I'd already pushed past the butt end of hyperglycemia, but my first aid training was in the right place. Step 3. The exam. Go into the triage. Nurse takes my BP and vitals. Observes that I'm obviously not 100% there mentally. Docs get an IV in me, and as it flushes, they draw blood as well. I share that I think I'm diabetic, and the AP and nurse both smile, ignore it, and spend 4 hours asking me about what drugs I'm on. Step 4. Smug face. I was diabetic. No apology from the doc, but my face was suitably smug every time he talked to me. Pretty great, really. Front of the line type stuff. Call my PCP friends or partner and say, "Hey, what are you doing for lunch? I've got a thing on me I want your opinion on. I'll buy you lunch." Or a radiologist. "Hey man, my shoulder's been killing me. I lifted too much with it and now it's borked. Mind doing an MRI? Sure. What's lunch look like for you?" Basically, I end up buying people lunches and they don't have to document anything. Win-win. I try not to flaunt my title, but it does have its advantages. Several years ago, I needed shoulder surgery. The morning of the surgery, the anesthesiologist and his nursing student came in. He asked if anyone had consented me for my nerve block. I said no, and his nurse started doing the prep work, draping my shoulder, cleaning, etc. The anesthesiologist starts to explain to me. What we are doing is called a stellate nerve block. Saying it very slowly, it's where we take a probe and we try to find the nerve that goes down your shoulder. Again, all being said very slowly so I can understand. And then we do, I'm sorry, I'm one of the radiology fellows here in the hospital. His whole demeanor relaxed, and he said at a normal pace, "We're doing a stellate nerve block." He gently pulled the nursing student out of the way and finished the rest of the procedure himself. When I go to see a doctor, which is not often enough since I don't need no stinking doctor, it's nice to be able to cut to the chase and not have the minutia explained. However, I make it clear that I'm no longer on my playground, and it's their expertise that I'm paying for. I mostly sit there and try and convey what is wrong/what I need without telling the doctor. It's also hard not to just give them your history like you'd take a history and preempt their questions. Lay people don't announce, "Nothing runs in my family," without being asked. I always feel it's a bit twatty to say, "I'm a medical student/doctor" at the start, but then it's awkward when they work it out and you haven't told them before. I also feel under pressure to understand or remember exactly what they're talking about and prove my knowledge too. My dad is a pharmacist, and the number of times I'd come out of an appointment with a certain prescription and he would call the doctor to tell them to change it is countless. Most of the time he was colleagues or had a 1 degree of separation kind of relationship with these doctors, so they didn't seem to mind, even though it was awkward for me personally. Typically, he knew of a better option or just one of the generic, which would save him a bunch of money. I had one eye doctor who was mad though, so that was not fun. I am super polite, show up early, and yield to expertise that isn't specific to my specialty, radiology. I imagine that in some ways it's easier for my docs because they don't have to dumb anything down for me. I'm a nurse, and the worst thing for me is blood draws and IVs. At work, I'm the one they look for when there's a tough stick no one else can hit. I can tell in the first 30 seconds if the person knows what they're doing, but unless they're really hurting me, I try not to micromanage. Also, I have high blood pressure that runs 130/80 on a good day. If you let the air out of the cuff in 5 seconds and say it's 110/60, I don't trust you anymore. Not a doctor, but a medical lab scientist. My doctor knows what I do and sometimes jokes, "You could run this yourself, right?" Went to the ED and the RN asked if I was an MLS because she set the tubes she drew from my arm down without mixing them, and I immediately began to mix them. It's important to mix them because certain ones are rejected if a clot forms. She was like, "Great," without sarcasm. Another ED visit, The nurse learned what I did and insulted my career. You just push buttons all day? No. The instrument can't tell between a blast and a mono. I do. I go to an office outside of my job because I don't want my employer to have access to my medical record. Not that I have anything significant in my medical history to hide, and not that my employer can legally access my file without my consent, but I still like it this way. I started seeing a nurse practitioner out of necessity of getting an appointment, and now I choose to see her. She's thorough, she listens, and we get along really well. She actually gave me her personal email in case I needed to get a hold of her for any reason. That's not something you do for patients, but she knows I get it, and I would never abuse that privilege. Fourth-year medical student. I tore my bicep, and before surgery, the anesthesiologist used an ultrasound to place a nerve block in my brachial plexus. This happens to be one of the biggest pain-in-the-butt bundles of nerves in the human body. It crisscrosses every which way and sends off branches which sometimes reconnect. I'm hopped up on benzos with a huge needle in my neck, and this dude is like, "What are the nerve roots of this little guy?" pointing to some blurry line on the screen. Screw that guy.
What's the worst case of helicopter parents that you've ever seen? I had a friend in middle or high school who was a Chinese girl adopted by an old white couple who were super weird and overprotective. Some of the things I remember about her parents: Mum volunteered at whatever school we were at and would sit with us at lunch to make sure her daughter was eating. They drove a minivan and made her sit in a car seat in the very back row until like freshman year of high school. Anytime someone praised them for raising such a good daughter, they would laugh and say, "She's not our daughter, she's adopted." They wouldn't let her ride the school bus, join any clubs, or hang out with anyone after school. When she got her driver's license, the dad brought light sticks, like air traffic controller sticks. Anytime she left the house, he would stand in the street with his light sticks and blocked traffic so that people wouldn't hit her as she backed out of the driveway. It was hilarious to watch, but she was completely mortified. This one broke my heart. My little brother is adopted, and I've lost my crap at people who've tried to say he's not my brother. I can't imagine ever feeling or thinking that way myself. That poor girl, people like that have no place adopting. The light sticks bit is hilarious, though. I had a friend growing up whose mother was very protective. The father, not so much, but she was so bad that my parents called her Mama Hawk. I invited him to my 10th birthday party, which was at a laser tag place. His mum came, which was fine, but then while we were playing laser tag, she stood with him the whole time. Didn't play, just stayed by him. Really? What was she protecting him from? He turned out surprisingly normal and now lives 1,000+ miles away from her. I'm not sure how she deals with that. She probably thanks her lucky stars every night that he grew up a fine, well-adjusted young man living on his own, all because she boldly protected him from those deadly, deadly lasers. My friend wasn't allowed to use scissors until he was in high school. His parents were insane. You should have seen their reaction when he joined the army.
The army? Are you fricking insane? Do you want to live in constant fear? Do you want to have some psycho drill sergeant hovering over you and controlling your every fricking move?
No, Mom, that's why I'm leaving home and joining the army. I can imagine that there aren't many harsher forms of rebellion for a child of helicopter parents than leaving to an organization where you're both placed in harm's way and often completely cut off from contact. Hopefully that kid established some boundaries afterwards. Had a roommate freshman year whose mother called every day and stayed the first whole week of school. Alright. She would also randomly fly up to stay a week or two in the same bed with her daughter, accompanying her to all classes, meals, and social gatherings. The mum was afraid her daughter would not be pre-med anymore and would do anything to make sure she didn't change majors. I think what made this an extreme story was the fact that her mum flew in multiple times in one year and called every day all the way from India to the US. I work at a university. We had a parent get worried because he had not contacted her in a while and wasn't taking her calls. We tracked him down and it turned out he was just ignoring her because she called multiple times a day and was driving him crazy. I was a resident assistant in college and received a call at 3 a.m. to do a wellness check on a resident. We lived in the townhouses and it was winter, so I had to bundle up and started trudging through the snow. I'm 3/4 of the way there when I get another call canceling the wellness check. The kid's mom was worried that he wasn't answering her calls. Turns out he was asleep at 3 a.m. I was a charge nurse in a substance and alcohol rehab, and this 19-year-old kid was admitted for smack detox and treatment. His mum wanted to be there for the entire admission process, which isn't out of the ordinary for families. However, after the kid was admitted and shown to his room, his mum wouldn't leave. Detox patients would get assessments every 2 to 4 hours and were asked a series of questions to determine if they would need medication for withdrawal. His mother answered all his questions for him, and at the end of the assessment was like, he'll take 10 milligrams of Valium for his anxiety, all while this kid lay in bed watching TV. In this particular rehab, visitors, cell phones, and laptops were allowed, so we couldn't tell her to leave until visiting hours were over. That time arrives, and you guessed it, she's still there. As the charge nurse, I had the honor of asking her to leave. Mum looked at me legitimately confused and replied, I have to leave? I was going to stay here with my son. There are 2 beds in his room, so I didn't think it was a problem. I then explained to his mum that the second bed needed to be kept open for another potential admission. Then I was yelled at for not providing her son with a private room and that this guy in the admissions department said she could stay throughout her son's detox and treatment. I told her patients weren't allowed to have overnight guests. She was appalled because she thought that because she was the mother that she fit into some kind of loophole or something. After she left, she visited every day and stayed from the beginning of visiting hours to the end. When she wasn't there, her son was on the phone with her. Needless to say, this kid relapsed immediately after he finished treatment. In conclusion, Enabler Mother actually wanted to stay in her adult son's room while he was in rehab. Jesus, that poor kid.
If that was my mum, I'd use substances too. This makes me feel sad. She probably just wanted her son to get better. I mean, she was going about it in an insane way, but I don't even know what I would do if my son was in that situation.
Newly enrolled freshman in college, and the poor kid's mum would come to the school and walk with him through the cafeteria line, picking out what she thought he should be eating. She did this for all 3 meals. Poor guy was so embarrassed. Freshman move-in day 1, I hung out, ate, roamed around, went to a soccer game, and went home. 3 days later, my daughter calls me. Oh my God, Mom, there are still parents here. She was horrified. I was too. My mum once got a job application for me, filled it out, signed it, submitted it, got it back, emailed them confirming that I'd take it, then she told me she'd picked up the application for me. So that. She's done far more embarrassing and helicopter-y things, but I don't want anyone recognizing me, so that's all for now. I actually forgot about a worse case than this while writing. A girl that was a year below me in high school ended up going to the same community college as me. Her mum sits outside of all her classes listening in. She also makes her daughter dress the same as her and wear the same hairstyle. Her daughter is legitimately brainwashed. She doesn't have any friends because everyone is too creeped out by the situation, and her mother probably wouldn't allow it anyways. I wish I could help her somehow, but there isn't really a CPS for young adults who are brainwashed. I find it amusing that the term in English is helicopter parents. I guess it's about how they hover over you. In Sweden, we call it curling parents, as in the sport curling. It's a reference to the players with the brooms who sweep the way for the curling rock. In this analogy, the child is the curling rock and the parents are sweeping the path for them through life. We refer to the ones who remove all obstacles for their kids as snowplow parents. Usually, snowplow and helicopters are one and the same, but not always. Friends with a girl in elementary school who had parents who wouldn't let her watch PG movies at the age of 12, even with parental guidance. She wasn't allowed to come over to my house because I mentioned my favorite movie at the time to them and it wasn't G-rated. She nearly drowned at the beach a couple of years ago getting caught in a riptide, suffered permanent brain damage from a lack of oxygen. Her parents now have the forever child that they always wanted. I worked with a mother who didn't want her adult son with autism to ride the bus because she was afraid that child predators might get him. Like, lady, there are valid reasons to be concerned about your 21-year-old son riding the bus, but those guys aren't one of them. I had a father question everything about my lesson planning and teaching methods during a parent-teacher meeting. I was well prepared and I fielded his questions very well. After asking probably 50 questions, he looks around the classroom with a big smirk and says, "Sorry to ask so many questions. I'm what you call a helicopter parent." In response, I told him I was more than happy to give him weekly updates about his son, as well as spending my office hours to sit down with him to help further. His response? "Oh, I'm much too busy for that." Worst helicopter parent ever. I had a father who worked as an administrator at another school who would constantly send me emails questioning my teaching methods. His son was in my class. He was friends with my evaluating principal, so I was concerned that my job might be at risk and started responding with, "I'm not comfortable discussing this via email, but I would be happy to meet with you." Of course, he was always too busy to meet with me in person. Shortly after this, he accompanied me on a field trip, but said nothing about his concerns and didn't speak to me at all. He was on his cell phone the whole trip. The next year, he was arrested for inappropriate behavior with young teenage boys, and my evaluating principal had resigned. Yuck. I don't think this is in the same category as the other parent copters, but I should have figured that there would be at least one whose absurdity transgressed the line into straight-up creepiness. Probably an acquaintance of mine. This guy, quote, knows that his son is going to be a great NFL quarterback. The kid turned 10 recently and is a decent player, but his father has him work with different trainers and spend hours each day practicing. He takes vitamins, has a special diet, and isn't allowed to play other sports because his dad wants him to focus completely on football and doesn't want him to risk an injury playing another sport that would sideline him for football. He can't have sleepovers or do any normal kid things. I know for a fact that the kid has told his parent that he doesn't want to play anymore, but the dad doesn't care. He says that as a parent, he has to do what is best for his kid. My sons play sports too, and they don't always want to go to practice, so I understand making them stick with something they signed up for. My kids know that they have to finish out a season, but I'm perfectly fine if they don't want to sign up for the next one. I just don't understand why someone would continue to sign their kid up for something they clearly don't want to do. It's a situation that I can't see ending well, honestly. Living vicariously through your children, especially to this degree, is one of the most harmful things you can do to them. I hope this kid manages to break free. I really do. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a troop commander in the army, I had a kid who came up hot for white snow in the pea in a cup test, and then a week later was arrested by the local police department task force for being an enforcer in a local civilian military substance ring. They charged him and remanded him back to the army custody, where I immediately started the paperwork to chapter him out and let the civilian justice system take its course. The guy was 23, I think. His mum called me several times to tell me that Chris has never been in any real trouble before and he's such a sweet kid. Anytime anything happened in high school, I helped him work it out. I need to come up and talk with you and get this sorted out. I was dumbfounded. The guy was 23 years old, in the army, and his mum thinks she can come in and work it out with me. I was polite for the first call, but by the second or third phone call, I'd had enough. I told her, again, not to bother coming up to the installation, that her son wasn't a sweet kid, or else he wouldn't have beaten some guy up for not paying money he owed to a local dealer, and that the whole reason he was in this mess in the first place was because his mum had never let him be accountable for his actions. I told her that he was under my authority now, and I had no time or patience for someone who didn't take their obligation to the army, the country, or their buddies seriously enough to keep themselves out of trouble long enough to make our upcoming deployment to Iraq. When she complained that getting a dishonorable discharge would ruin his life, I informed her that fortunately I didn't have the time to waste giving him a dishonorable discharge, so he would be okay on that score. Other than honorable is what he wound up with, but the city of Harker Heights and the state of Texas might have more time than I did, so that was where she ought to focus her effort. She said I was being unfair and called my boss, which was fine by me. It blew my mind that a woman with a fully grown adult son in the army would think it was appropriate or healthy to call and talk to her son's commander about his multiple counts of misconduct and general failure to be an adult. But that, of course, is why he failed at being an adult in the first place. Teacher here. A friend of mine had a mum who came to lunch every day with her kid from kindergarten to, last I checked, 2nd grade. A little much, but the kicker is she used to spoon-feed him. This child had no issues, was completely capable of feeding himself, but she insisted on feeding him so she could monitor what he ate. A mother at a university parents' session explained how her son enjoyed reading before bed and would occasionally leave his light on. Being the considerate mother that she was, she didn't want to call to make sure he had turned his lights out, since that might wake him. She wanted to know if there was someone at the university that could check up on him every night. I love this. A lot of the others are over-the-top, blatant crazy, while this one is so wholesome and innocent, but also just so fricking unreasonable. It was me. I was 22 and had moved back from home a few months after my divorce, so I could save up enough money for an apartment. No credit, so it was $1,500 to move in. I went to visit an old friend 45 minutes away. She didn't use cell phones, so I told my mum I wouldn't be checking mine out of courtesy. But I would text when I got there and when I left. I got there, texted, and put my phone on silent. After a few hours, I got a bad feeling and checked my phone. My mum had checked the Find My Friends app, and it said I was in a drainage ditch. Funnily enough, it was right next to the restaurant we were eating at, because that app isn't always accurate, and said if I didn't call her, she'd call the police. I called her, and she had to hang up with the police to answer my call, because her adult daughter didn't answer the phone for a few hours after I'd warned her that I wouldn't. Had a really rich friend of a friend whose dad once picked him up in a helicopter. I run a huge book rental department for a good-sized university, 15,000 students. It's a beautiful program, 95% of our students' books are covered by one $85 fee. Anyway, I've seen some crazy stuff with parents. Honestly, there isn't enough space on Reddit for me to relay all the stories. My number one, however, is... It's move-in day, the worst day of the year, hundreds upon hundreds of students coming to get their books all at once. Most freshmen accompanied by their parents. This one lady marches up to the desk, pushing all other customers aside and dragging her mortified-looking son along by the hand. She then demands that I tell her how she get her son's books. I tell her the best way for your son to get his books is to use his class schedule and go find them himself, as he'll need to do this every semester moving forward. The aisles are alphabetical, and the courses arranged numerically once you find the right aisle. She tells me that she doesn't believe her son is capable of doing that. Now, at the time, I didn't expect to be staying as the manager of the department or employed by the university, so with nothing to lose, I said, "Then your son isn't capable of succeeding in college." And she lost it. Absolutely started flipping out, screaming that I called her son stupid. After her rage, I said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're the one who suggested to me that your son is incapable of using the alphabet and numbers to perform a simple matching task. I was just going off the information you provided." She stared at me. "In other words, I'm pretty sure that you're the one who just called your son stupid when you told me that he's incapable of accomplishing a kindergarten-level skill." She throws another fit and then smashes the schedule into the kid's hand. He looks like he wants to die. She points off toward the shelves and tells him that she will be here if he needs her. Then she turns and glares at me with a "we'll see" look. I wish her a nice day and go back into my office and continue to observe the chaos of move-in day. Kid found his books in 5 minutes and tried to sneak out without her noticing. Sadly, her hover skill was greater than his sneak. She spotted him headed out the door and ran after him screaming his name. I worked at IT at my college, and the number of mums I got to tee off made my day. I would literally get hundreds of calls on big registration days or the first weeks of classes asking how they log into our system to check their sons' and daughters' grades. I would have to explain, you can't. And when they demanded me to give them their sons' or daughters' passwords so they could get in or reset the password, I would explain FERPA laws to them. Seriously, they just need to let their children learn on their own. If they make a mistake, they can learn from it. Was a TA once. The best is, have you tried talking to your kids in the least snarky tone of voice you can muster? Your child is a legal adult now and has their own privacy. We can't violate it by giving away personal information. Have you tried asking your son or daughter about their grades or assignments? I mean, personally, I can't think that they would change their methods if they got as far as their children going to college without coming in on some sort of effective communication strategy, but you never know. Good on you, TA. Was in court waiting to see the judge. Another case is going on about this high school senior hitting a kid with his car on campus. His mum goes up with him and the judge started asking questions and the mum answered them. The judge politely told her he'd like to hear from the son and she agreed. The boy started to explain what happened when she immediately cut him off, told him he was telling it wrong. She begins talking again and the judge, visibly annoyed now, asks her if she was there. "No, but I know what happened," she assured him. When the judge told her multiple witnesses claim that's not what happened, she called them liars who were just out to attack her boy. She continued to argue with everything the judge said, until he finally had enough of this woman interrupting him and had her removed. Eventual friend in high school. His mother was there every day, all day. Was a private school, day student. She walked with him to class, rehearsal, music lessons, the fricking bathroom. Took the entire year to get her to stop. He ended up hiding from her. This kid was brilliant. Perfect SAT scores, accomplished musician, amazing actor. We gave him his first soda, gum, etc. Father was an ex-priest who screwed the organist. Mother was an ex-nun. Both were bat-crap crazy. We were all so proud when he went to college 800 miles away. Then it went very bad. Originally, the story was that he took his own life, which made no sense. Everything was going his way. Had full scholarship, escaped his parents, and even more amazing, a beautiful girlfriend. He redefined awkward. His mother kept insisting it was murder, that the mafia had killed him, but nobody believed her in the slightest. Fast forward a few years and a few unrelated criminal investigations, and yeah, it was the Russian mob. Apparently his girlfriend's father took a strong dislike to him when he said something unforgivable, again, he redefined awkward, and had him killed. Well, that got dark fast. I think that's the first legitimate time I've heard someone actually get killed by the mob. I know, right? Been years and the absurdity hasn't waned. I had a mother start emailing me 10 minutes after her son left a job interview with me, then start calling for 3 days straight along with 5 or so emails a day, talking up her son and how perfect he was, and this job is a perfect fit and she would make sure he'd be there every day. Then she starts with the rules I would have to follow, such as he can't stay more than 5 minutes after 6 because she has to make dinner, and since she'd be driving him to and from every day, he mustn't be late. Then she starts asking if I could direct deposit his checks into her account so she can help him manage his money, etc. All this was going on without an inkling that I would offer him the job. She was just making these demands for him up front because this job would have to work around her schedule. Needless to say, I didn't hire him. He was a good fit too, but not with that baggage. For about a year or so, I took my daughter to an anxiety clinic to help her deal with a phobia she had developed. A certain amount of the therapy involved parents, or whoever had bought the kid, working with the child. The rest of the time, the parents hung out, waiting for their kids to finish the rest of the session, where the kids went elsewhere. One kid, Robert, had general anxiety, more or less. He had quite clearly gotten it from his mother, who was a bit of a basket case, and would do stuff like staying up all night redoing his homework so it would be done right. That poor kid. I'd arranged to play golf with a few mates when we were all around 18. One guy gets driven to the course by his mum, but rather than just being dropped off, she parked the car and decided to wait with us until it was our turn to tee off the first hole. And then she decides that she had better stay and walk with us for the entire 4+ hours of golf. A guy in the next group sees what's going on and intervenes, saying, "Hey lady, non-players are not permitted on the course, so you'd better just go home and let your son play golf with his buddies in peace." Oh, I bet that went over real well with her.
The real MVP.
Reddit, how have you made a rude person's day worse? Excuse the change in voice, I am currently getting over COVID. Today on the train, I sat next to a woman who was angry that I sat next to her because she wanted the 2 seats to herself. As I sat there, she kept mouthing under her breath how she just wanted to sit there alone, blah blah blah. Despite the fact I wanted to tell her that it was public transportation and she needed to get over it, I kept my mouth shut. A few minutes later, a large woman with a large purse comes and stands in the same car I was in. I get her attention and tell her that she could have my seat. She huffs and puffs her way to me, and I help her sit down while grinning at the angry woman who was upset I'd sat beside her. I enjoyed watching her head almost explode from anger as the other large woman's rolls and purse pressed against her for the rest of the ride. Anyone else have any of those subtle revenge stories? Edit, this lady is a regular and is a known seat hog. I've seen her get into arguments before with people because she wants 2 seats to herself. Everyone pays to ride the train, so if there's a seat open, then it's up for grabs. I was working as a manager in a big nightclub about a year ago. I don't wear a uniform, but have a radio and run the security team. The venue has a great smoking section that looks out onto the street. One night, the venue was packed, so I did my usual roam making sure that there were no problems. However, it was too packed to walk through the smoking section, so I walked down the street instead, but could still very easily see into the smoking section. One guy stares me down, then calls me over and starts swearing at me for no reason, and telling me that, quote, pieces of crap like you could never even get into a venue like this. He obviously had no idea I was the manager. However, I didn't want to have security get into a fight inside with him. The guy kept telling me he would punch me out and stuff, and was clearly trying to look macho to impress someone. So I agreed and told him to come and meet me outside and he could even have a free swing. He puts his drink down, takes off his jacket, and storms outside. Once he walked outside, I walked back inside and told security not to let him back in. The look on his face when he realized I ran the place was priceless, and then the realization that he couldn't get back into the club was amazing. It was the easiest and most fun removal I have ever done. I'm a manager at a grocery store, so I get awesomely rude customers on a daily. Every Wednesday is senior discount day. You have to be 55 to 60 to qualify for the discount. Needless to say, Wednesdays are tense. Lots of seniors and lots of other people who don't want to deal with the seniors. I don't generally mind the old folks. Most of them are pretty cool and have some interesting stories and cute jokes. This Wednesday, there was one particular customer who was being a huge pain in the butt from the moment she walked in. She was tall, blonde, high heels, very made up, and dressed to the nines. She was probably late 30s to early 40s. She came storming up to customer service. "There are no parking spots. This is ridiculous. I'm going to request to corporate that you expand your parking lot since you don't seem to have the initiative to request that yourself." Off to a great start, lady. She comes storming back up about 45 minutes later. "I am in a huge hurry, and every line has someone in it. I need to check out here." We had 3 lines open, and each one had one single customer. One. I say, "No problem, but I'll get you at a checkout. You have too many items to get here." She has a huge hissy fit. "I don't have time for this. Let's go." As I'm checking her out, it is constant whining. "You only have one brand of makeup? That is ridiculous. I only wear MAC, but I was going to settle for Revlon, but you don't even have that. Now I have to make a whole separate trip. Please don't put my bread on top of my eggs. The eggs could roll over and crush the bread. Please bag my avocados separately. I need to use those for a face mask tonight. They need to be perfect. I have a photo session for work tomorrow. I'm in a magazine." She was unbelievable. Finally, at the end, I had enough. As she's about to pay, I say, "Don't forget today is senior discount day. You get 5% off." She just stared at me. "What?" I smiled broadly. "Every Wednesday, senior citizens get 5% off their bill. I'll go ahead and take it off. You are 55 to 60, right?" She is staring at me, debit card in hand, cheeks getting red. I lose my smile slowly and say, "Oh, you don't qualify? Sorry about that. Maybe next year. Thanks for your honesty." I haven't seen her in the store since. I used to work for the DMV, and the one I worked at had pretty limited parking. Surprise! I had left for lunch, came back, and was having a hard time finding a place to park. I finally found a spot, so I drove up to it and put my signal on showing that I was waiting for it. People, in my experience, usually respect this and continue on. Not this time. Just as the car was backing out, after I had waited a few minutes, a car came from the opposite side of the lot, made eye contact with me, and then shot right into the parking space. I was so mad because now I would be late after looking for a new spot. As I drove past the woman that had taken the spot, I just shook my head and she responded by shrugging her shoulders, smiling, mouthing the words, "Oh well," to me, and then ran her finger from her eye down her cheek as if to mock me crying about it. I continued into work, got in trouble for being late, but had actually forgotten about the incident until whose number gets called to my station but Miss Spot Stealer herself. The look on her face was priceless. Keep in mind that I'm not your average DMV worker. I understand that stuff happens and waive penalties all the time and treat my customers with respect because I believe that what goes around comes around, and I know how crappy it is to wait at the DMV all day. I'm usually so nice about getting penalties taken off people's accounts that I get in trouble for it at times. So, I greet Spot Stealer as nice as I would anyone else. In fact, it may have been nicer than it normally would be. She may have thought I didn't recognize her. Her registration is far past due, with hundreds due in penalties. I let her tell me her whole sob story and then finally tell her that she owes in full because she was aware of her due date. She argues it a little until, out of sight from my manager, I mouth the words, "Oh well," and drag my finger from my eye to my cheek, mocking her tears. At point, she puts her head down and proceeds to take out her card and pay the full amount. Because yes, we do take debit cards. What goes around, comes around. When I was working a crappy job in my younger days, a customer was upset that he had to wait in line like everyone else before being able to make his purchase. He actually said, "Do you know who I am? I own hotels." To which I replied, "Well, sir, I'm sorry, but this isn't Monopoly. This is Krispy Kreme." He was not pleased. Not even COVID can keep me from telling you to subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, and I promise I'll sound a lot better next time. I was sitting in my car taking some photos with my new smartphone while using different settings. Then there was this woman who had just stopped at a one-way street with only one lane. So she stands there for like 10 seconds doing nothing. and I thought this is very unusual. So I started to make a video. Another driver comes and honks. She then starts to reverse and hit the car of the other guy with their big BMW. 4 guys jumped out of the BMW and start yelling at the guy. You have to know in Germany, always the one who hits another car from behind will be blamed if he can't prove that it wasn't his fault. So we have a classic case of insurance fraud. The poor guy at the back was really worried because he knew he couldn't prove it. I just sit there in my car and waited for the police. Then I go outside and the police started to get the stories. Of course, there was 4 against 1. I just stood there and listened to the woman complaining about who this idiot hits her from behind and her brand new car is now damaged. After the police took the statement from both sides and even take my statement, they said there was no chance that 2 versus 4 could prove that he didn't do it. 2 of the guys at the BMW said they didn't know the girl and were pedestrians who saw it. That would increase the credibility. So they made all false statements to the police, and exactly that's the thing I wanted to happen. I then told the police, oh wait, there's just one thing, like Columbo style, and said that I have a video of what happened. I showed them to the police, and the women and the drivers just stand there with mouth open. You could not only see how she hits his car, but also that the quote, pedestrians were with the women in the car. The guy then hugs me, and we became good friends. Turns out he lives near me, and we spend the evening drinking and gaming. I'm in a massive line at a store. I'm next in line, but the person in front of me has a crap load of stuff. A helpful clerk sees the mess and opens another aisle saying, I can help the next customer. Well, that's me. However, the checkout counter has 2 sides, a right and a left. It is set up for people to come to the right side, but the left can be used as well. As I am stepping over to her counter, this jerkwad from the very end of my line is sprinting to her counter, pushing people with his partner in tow. He arrives right before me. They have a mountain of items in their cart, which he starts throwing on the checkout counter. I am standing there on the other side with my one item burning with rage. Checkout girl waits until he stacks all of his crap on the counter, looks at me, looks at him, and says to him, I'm sorry sir, you're on the wrong side. You'll have to go to the end of the line, which is now massive. I put on my biggest grin, made eye contact with him as long as possible, and loudly told the clerk how awesome she was. Just the other day, I was at a Chinese buffet, and the 3 people in the booth next to me were questioning the waitress. She appeared to be Asian Hispanic, about voting for the president and who she planned to vote for. She had trouble understanding them and communicating that she could not vote. They immediately began taunting her that she shouldn't be here if she couldn't vote, that she didn't even know who the president of the United States is, and then took a picture and said they would post it on Facebook. I later found out the waitress was on a school visa and couldn't vote, but was unable to convey that to them. After the waitress walked off, one of the girls at the table, the one who took the pic, looked up and asked me where I worked because I looked familiar. When I replied, the local university in the social work department, she commented that she had recently been in my office to apply to our program, to which I replied, yes, I remember you, and I'm also on the admissions committee, followed with a wink. The color drained from her face, and she knew she was screwed. Karma's a jerk. TLDR, I provided unsolicited marriage counseling services to a jerkwad. I worked at a hotel several years ago and had to deal with insufferable pricks about a dozen times a day. Hotel stories about Billy Mays watching granny adult films, a person that threw hot coffee in my face, a person that spit on me, and a crazy lady that slapped me are in my comment history. The best/most evil revenge I ever got was on a guy that stayed with us 4 days a week for the entire 5 years I worked at the hotel. The big utility company in our area was having financial issues, and he was the leader of the auditing team that was sent in to straighten it out. Anyway, I would interact with the guy at least a few times every day I worked, and he was always very rude and condescending. As an example, one of his coworkers would ask me for a local restaurant recommendation, and he would chime in with, yeah, because minimum wage workers are known for their taste in fine dining. If someone asked me for something personal, he would say something like, ask him what life choices he made to be here plunging toilets and writing down my preferred wake-up call time. Maybe he can share his wisdom so we all avoid his fate. Stuff like that. He was just a jerk to everyone on the hotel staff and was always very demanding. Since I saw him every day, I noticed that he had developed a relationship with one of the younger women on his auditing team. I saw the romance blossom from flirting to full-on groping and grinding in the hotel lobby. One day, he had just finished delivering one of his delightfully crappy bon mots to me, and I was fuming. Then he screamed at one of my coworkers because she had a Filipino accent, and he said he only wanted his room cleaned by, quote, white Americans. I vowed revenge. His wife called in to speak to him later that night, like she usually did, and I said, "Oh, I think he's sleeping in Mrs. Blank's room tonight. One moment, please." And then I connected his wife to her room. His wife must not have told him what I had said, because he didn't try to get me fired. They got a divorce. They didn't have kids, but according to another guy on the auditing team, his wife got the house and custody of their dog. He stopped saying with us shortly after the phone call. I was riding my bike to work one day, and when crossing a street, in the legal zone with the walk sign, a woman ran me over. She drove through the crosswalk looking to turn right and ran right into me. She stopped after I got bumped hard enough by her fender to take a spill and have some bruising all down my side. She gave me an exasperated, "my bad" wave and continued to talk on her cell phone, ignoring me as I picked myself and my bike up. I walked right up to her open window, grabbed her cell phone from her ear, and chucked it into a nearby parking lot as hard as I could. I swear that was the farthest I have thrown anything in my life. She gaped at me in shock as I struggled back onto my bike and slowly rode off, fuming yet victorious. Then a half-mile farther on my trek, I got attacked by a goose. Not my best day. TLDR, woman hit me with her car, got revenge, got attacked by goose. Edit, those who have pointed out that riding a bike in a crosswalk is not legal are correct. In this particular instance, it was not a sidewalk but a designated bike path. They had a normal walk signal at an intersection, but I believe it was still acceptable to ride across as it was a bike-specific path. I could be wrong though. I work in local theater, and we have a lot of rude, awful women who are part of local ballet schools come through our venue who are the mothers of the dancers. Once, this woman rang up wanting seats to an almost sold-out ballet performance that had been on sale for 4 months the day before the show and did nothing but abuse me for 5 minutes because she left buying them too late. Whined about how she shouldn't have to pay for her kids, whined that we should get a bigger venue, it seats just under 500, then put me on hold while she rang 3 of her relatives to see if they wanted seats too. She was positively awful. The seats I was about to sell her were the only ones in the theater left, and there were good seats. While I'm on hold, a grandma of one of the ballerinas comes to the desk and asks if we have any seats left, as she'd been in hospital and couldn't buy them earlier, but said she'd understand if we were booked out. I put the phone with the on-hold music down and sold this old lady the last seats for the show and gave her an invite to our next year's dance season for her granddaughter and herself, so she'd know exactly when all the important dates were coming. She thanked me over and over, and she's now one of our regulars and brings her grandkids to our shows. 2 minutes after the old lady leaves, the jerk on the other end finally takes me off hold and says she wants the remaining seats that we have left. I tell her, "Sorry, we've just sold out while you had me on hold, I'm afraid. Better luck next year. Anything else I can help you with?" She was choking with rage on the other end of the phone. It was fantastic. I watched a lazy shopper park their grocery cart right behind another person's car instead of putting it in the cart return. I got out of my car, ran up and moved the cart, and put it behind her car. I then ran off and watched her have to get back out of her car since she couldn't back out, and then finally proceed to put up her cart the right way. I felt like a champion of the people. Saw a woman with her husband toss a squash into a cooler that they apparently didn't want anymore. As they walked away, I picked up the squash and followed them. They left their cart for a moment, so I put the squash into their cart and walked away. She had a dumbfounded look on her face when she noticed it back in her cart. I put it in a very noticeable place and proceeded to put it on a nearby shelf, and they walked away. I, of course, took it off the shelf and followed them again, doing a drive-by drop-off of the squash. At this moment, my girlfriend got fed up with my antics and made me stop. I would have done it until they gave up and bought the squash, or I was caught. I'm very easily amused. Heard this from a DJ in my hometown. He's pushing his cart of groceries out of the store and over to his car when a woman pulls into the handicap spot in front of the store. No placard, no handicap plates. Jumps out of the car without so much as a limp and heads into the store. He gives her this stink eye about taking up a handicap spot and she snarls, "Deal with it," and sashays into the store. This guy is mad. He sees a couple cops who were leaning against their cars talking. They hadn't seen it, so he goes over and tells them the story. They smile and say they'll handle it. He puts his groceries in his car, and as he's pushing his cart back to the store to put it in the rack, good guy DJ, he says the cops have blocked the lady's car with theirs and were leaning against their car waiting for her. As he's putting his cart in the rack, the lady comes out of the store with her purchase, sees the cops, and almost craps herself. The fine in California is $250 to $500 for a first offense. Priceless. He walks over to her and says, "I dealt with it." Female Redditor. I was out at the local watering hole having a few beers with a group of friends. The group became larger and larger with time. After a while, I got semi-separated from my fiancé. I was introduced to a guy. We'll call him Bob. The introduction went like this. "Bob, this is psychocentric. Psychocentric, Bob." To which he says, "Every psychocentric I've ever met is a slut and unfaithful." Now, I don't get bent out of shape without good reason, so I just brush it off as drunk banter, or maybe a recent breakup with a psychocentric and say, "Well, I neither, but nice to meet you anyway, Bob," and shook his hand. The rest of the night, he would go to the bar, walk back, and give me the stink eye. For whatever reason, he didn't like me. The feeling was becoming mutual. I decided ignoring him would probably be best. He was certainly not in his right mindset, right? A few hours passed, and I was sitting by his female friend, having fun talking and giggling. He puts his elbows on the table in between us, staring at me like I had done him wrong somehow. I just kept on with our conversation and ignored him. He then puts his nasty face right next to mine and says, "So, are you a slut?" My temper and alcohol got the best of me, and I yelled, "No, and what is your problem exactly? I've been doing my best to ignore you. Get a clue." He then chest bumped me and said, "Do you want to go?" I'm all for equal rights, but this was the first time an able-bodied adult male has asked me, a girl, if I wanted to throw down. I walk over a few steps to my fiancé, who was talking to a bouncer friend of ours, and said, "This guy says he wants to kick my butt," while the douche just keeps advancing. The bouncer looks at him, gives a hand signal, and soon 5 red shirts, bouncer uniforms, surround him. He was, quote, escorted out of the bar and went to his minivan, drunk. I called work. I work for the sheriff's department. They got a good tip on a sure thing DUI. I might not have thrown down, but I think I won that round.
Teachers and professors, what was the most insane paper that you ever had to grade? This was my history class. We just spent 2 weeks on World War II, and the kids were supposed to write a summary essay on the major events. This one kid genuinely believed that World War II lasted 2 days. The Germans bombed Pearl Harbor, and the next day America nuked Tokyo.
Well, duh. Why else would it be called World War II? Because it lasted 2 days.
Wait, so World War III will take up my entire weekend and then some? The Secretary of War?
Mr. President, the Germans just bombed Pearl Harbor.
President Donald F. Eisenreagan?
Nuke Tokyo. But sir, it was Germany. Exactly. They'll never expect it.
I'm an English teacher, but this was when I was a TA for Latin American Studies class. The final paper was to be a research project about any Central American, South American, or Caribbean country of the student's choosing. The topic was open, just had to be about something in one of these countries. One student turns in her first draft, the whole thing is about the country of Madagascar. When we told her it didn't fit the requirements of the assignment, she accused us of being too scared of the part where she discusses graveyards in Madagascar. In my high school Spanish class, we had to do presentations on Spanish-speaking countries so we could learn about their culture. Also in my class was a guy who was super obsessed with soccer, who after weeks of working on this project, gets up and gives a full presentation on Brazil. The second sentence out of his mouth was, "The national language is Portuguese," and he just gave a presentation on famous players. As he goes to sit down, another guy in my class just goes, "Nice presentation on a Spanish-speaking country, man." This was in my science class, year 8, so ages 12 through 13, fairly simple general science end-of-term test. The kid had clearly decided to heed the advice to attempt all questions as we didn't use negative marking, so for every answer he didn't know, he just wrote tubes. The best thing was that this included a question near the end of the paper that asked for a description of how blood was pumped around the body. I gave him half a mark.
Well, maybe he vaguely remembered someone mentioning tubes and figured it must be relevant to at least one of the questions.
It's sort of the equivalent of picking C for multiple choice. It's bound to be right some of the time. If that's an equivalent, it's a very loose one. Taking the same formula that might net you a 33% correct answer rate and instead using one component of God knows how many answers available in the field of science is truly a leap of faith. My parents graded GCSE papers every summer. One year, my mum got an English essay exam on which the kid had written, "I don't understand the question, so I'm going to write you a poem," followed by said poem and an elaborate drawing of a tropical island. He got a D. I teach chemistry, and my kids write one big paper as a write-up after a long lab. Anyway, I had this one student, let's call him Joe, who was a pain in my butt. Constantly late, disrespectful to his classmates and me, often just ditched so he was way behind. Anytime I'd call on him during his class, his answer would be hydrogen. We could be talking about molecular structure. I'd call on Joe to tell me how a transition metal like iron was structurally different from a halogen, and still that's what he'd shout. Fast forward to the end of the year and the long lab write-up. All the kids, including Joe, have done the lab. I give rubrics, clear guidelines on what to expect them to discuss, and a deadline. Deadline comes, and they're all submitted through Google Classroom. I start reading. I'd made it through about 10 of them, and they're okay. The kids give it a decent shot. Then I get to Joe's essay. He'd literally typed the sentence, "The answer is always hydrogen," hundreds of times. Enough to reach the page-length requirement, and he had done it with the correct headers for each section too. I was impressed with the amount of effort that had been put into screwing his grade away. Most of the kids in that class were sophomores in high school. If I remember correctly, he earned the 5 points for correct formatting, and that was it. So he scored 5 out of 100. Definitely didn't pass that paper. I also allow kids to redo work, and he never took me up on that. This truly is my time. I was a teacher in high school. I taught some lower achieving kids in an English class. They were around 14 to 16 years old. One kid, Paul, was particularly bad. Not through a lack of intelligence, but effort. Paul is also a native English speaker. This is important to remember. Paul did not submit his persuasive essay when it was due, and continued to fail to submit it for another month and a half. I kept reminding him, phoning home, emailing other staff, etc. Paul, who was the only pupil who didn't submit an essay, believed I was picking on him and singling him out. Finally, in what I can only imagine in a fit of sudden inspiration linked to his belief, I received the following unceremoniously submitted 400-word masterpiece. Is teacher bias? Perhap. Yes, he wrote perhap. It was all typed in a funky, bold, jagged font. Here is a brief summary and extract. Is teacher bias? Perhap. In my experience, teacher is very biased towards me for no reason. It went on about what he understood to be the faults in the teaching profession for most of it. However, another particular highlight was where he stated, teachers can be racist, as reports have found. He proceeded to never reference this or go into detail about racism or reports ever again. Paul was also white, just putting that out there. I still freaking have that essay. I once was in an English class with several papers that had to be peer-reviewed. One of my classmates wrote a 15-page paper that was, for the most part, barely comprehensible. But the real kicker was that she directly quoted Santa Claus 2. In a final paper for a college-level senior capstone, a real person quoted the 2002 Tim Allen Christmas comedy Santa Claus 2. We also had to discuss each other's papers in class afterwards. Awkward.
I genuinely laughed aloud at this. I have to know, what was the quote?
Seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. Well, it's weird they picked the second one because I'm pretty sure they say that in the first movie too. I had a student who wrote about the right to, quote, bear, spelt B-A-R-E, arms. For some of the paper, he was talking about concealed carry laws and he was for it. Then he started arguing against the Second Amendment. Then he started talking about women wearing short-sleeved shirts. This was a college-level class. I still have photos of this paper, though I've lost the original copy. It's glorious. I read it to all new friends. Geography teacher here. I teach 18-year-olds. I had assigned a scientific paper for about 5 pages long. Topic was chosen from among the chapter on space. Had a student write it on the subject of the moon. Went off on the good start, different theories of how the moon came into existence, then suddenly she switched into astrology. It was so smooth I didn't notice until a full paragraph in. I had to explain to her why she failed. One of my classmates once wrote and presented on this wacky jumble of conspiracy theories about the Illuminati. The paper was bad, but the presentation was awkward as frick. He was doing numerology on the chalkboard to demonstrate that the Pope was actually the Antichrist and that George Bush was one of his minions. It would have been funny, but I'm pretty sure he was schizophrenic. Everyone just got really, really quiet, including the professor.
There was this girl who wrote about how the English language was only partially accessible to women. Not like that men had dominated the English language in terms of publishing or less censorship, but as in there are words and phrases that are 100% incomprehensible to women because of genetic differences between men and women.
Did she have any explanations for why she thought this?
She couldn't because she's a woman.
There's actually a communication theory called muted group theory that basically proposes this premise. It suggests that because language was created by men, they have the upper hand in expressing themselves, and women are limited not only in their language, but their view of the world due to the language at their disposal. It also suggests that there are some experiences that are uniquely female that they are unable to express due to having a lack of vocabulary, since language was designed by men. I'm not a huge fan of this theory, and I'm not a critical scholar in the least, but it does exist and some people find merit in it. I was a creative writing English major, and for the most part we had to peer review our classmates' work. We had to provide positive criticisms. Early on, it became apparent that some people were majoring in creative writing because it was an easy A. I remember critiquing some papers, and the only positive thing that I could come up with was, "I like your punctuation?" That made my teacher laugh out loud in class.
These quotation marks, how beautiful yet simplistic. They speak of your past, your future, how you live your life. Your entire being clearly went into these exceptional quotation marks.
A friend of mine took a creative writing class, and according to him, he had to peer review stories someone wrote about their persona, and also a Sword Art Online fanfic. I don't know if the same student wrote both.
Oof, I'm hit by secondhand embarrassment of that. I'd be way too shy or sensible to write about personas in college.
It's good to see that my classmates remember me this far along in life. The narrator is joking, by the way. I'd also like to inform you for the next story that I'm going to be saying the word congenital. I need you to mentally remove the con part of the words so that you can both understand the next part and get this past the YouTube censors. I had a student in freshman comp who was in her final research report based off the novel Frankenstein using the thesis, "Congenital manipulation of human beings in laboratories is wrong because God says so." No, that's not a typo, congenital manipulation. Apparently she had used find and replace because that was the way it was through the whole 8-page paper. She clearly meant genetic manipulation, but every single instance of the phrase genetic manipulation had been replaced with congenital manipulation. After I hauled myself out from under the desk of my office where I'd slid because I was crying with laughter, I really did read the paper. Apart from the crappy thesis, the paper had not had a single decent source, no real arguments, and the organization was chaotic at best. Worst part? I'd had multiple individual conferences throughout the semester with the students to work on thesis statement and developing arguments. She had never bothered to come to a single one and was teed off when I failed her.
This one's priceless. I keep a whole file of such beauties from my student papers. And yes, I'm an English professor. Here's a couple. So You Want to Be President is a copulation of little thought about facts concerning the 41 American presidents. Wuthering Heights is a novel written in the Victorian era, but that excretes many of the symptoms of a romantic piece of literature. Children are at such a venerable young age.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was in a master's program for the last 2 years, and I had to peer review a classmate's paper. Holy crap. We were supposed to write a persuasive research essay on an effective way to make college more affordable. I was lucky enough to peer review a classmate and co-worker who already possessed not 1, but 2 master's degrees, and he was somehow on his way to a doctorate. I'm honestly still perplexed, trying to figure out how he got those other 2 degrees. Anyways, the paper was littered with grammatical errors. My favorite of those was when he started making up words and talked about the problem of student indebtedness. He probably meant indebtedness, but he used it incorrectly multiple times, so make what you will of that. He also referred to the student debt problem as an extra layer on students' frustration cake. Yep, This person was a veteran, and at one point in the paper he talked about the terror events of 9/11/11. I understand that's a single number typo, but also if you're going to state that as your reason for joining the military, at least proofread it like you care about what happened that day. The good part, however, was his actual argument. For some reason, he was arguing that college should be more affordable, but only for veterans. You know, like what the GI Bill does. He said that we could make this happen by simply cutting the salaries of professors and giving that money back to the students. We're going to save colleges and universities in America by failing to pay our professors, everyone. Just the way he wrote indebtedness tells me how he's already had 2 masters. I worked with a nurse once who was horribly lazy and an all-around bad nurse and a miserable person. We looked her up online to see how she possibly managed to get through nursing school. We found her resume where she repeatedly referred to herself as a register nurse. Then we asked another nurse we knew how she made it through school. They went to the same university. That nurse told us they tried to kick her out over and over, but she had threatened to sue them, like she did everybody at work. So yeah, a college education doesn't necessarily mean anything. Math teacher in our school graded an IB/SL math examination, and out of 90 marks on the test, she was able to award 1 mark. It wasn't for lack of trying either. Whoever wrote the exam tried a solid amount of the exam, except they literally didn't get anything but 1 question right. Current English professor. I can't think of a single worst, but here are some crazy ones in my Hall of Fame. Number 1. When I taught 8th grade, I had to insist that a photo of a koala bear off Google Images would not serve as a proper paper title. 2. Just a sad one. One student really slacked off on a paper with a fully MLA formatted first page, 2 sentences and an "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lancer." 3. The paper wasn't bad, but despite going over APA title pages at length in class, I had a student who turned in their APA paper with a teal and turquoise book-like MS Word cover template that was gaudy and had very little of the required info. 4. I can think of many where the writing was just poor or didn't have proper grammar, but one goof from a recent semester sticks out in terms of errors in writing. The student did a good poetic analysis of the poem Because I Could Not Stop for Death, cited it correctly as by Emily Dickinson, yet all throughout the paper referred to the poet as Elizabeth Dickerson. Also, in one that doesn't at all count amongst my worst, but maybe one of my most memorable, I assigned a paper with the goal of arguing successfully for both sides, then mediating it as an advancement of lessons in argumentation. Most students chose from a list of very serious and difficult to solve problems, but one student requested to do a paper on the "Are hot dogs sandwiches" debate. It was an impeccable paper that did reach a nice mediation, but it was also incredibly memorable among papers on substance epidemics and immigration questions. I was a chemistry TA, and a lot of the students would include silly details like how much they liked a lab partner in their first report of the year. One student took this to the next level by writing out a log of his whole day before doing the experiment, what he had for breakfast, the bus he took to class, how he was 3 minutes early. Everything. This was at the university level. I once had a student turn in a paper that was a little shy of the length requirement at a first glance, then I started reading it. It was the same several-paragraph original passage repeated over and over, sometimes with slight variations, for the whole length of the paper. Not a teacher, but I peer-reviewed the essay or short story of a classmate of mine in my junior year of high school. We were supposed to write about a historical event from the perspective of someone who was there. For example, I wrote about the perspective of a court stenographer in one of the McCarthy trials. This girl decided to write about the first Olympic Games, but seemed to have a basic lack of understanding of history. Her story, which again was about the first Olympic Games from the perspective of an athlete, involved texting, cars, and was absolutely laden with pop culture references. In addition to this, every I was lowercase, and the whole essay was center justified, because of course it was. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that part correctly, but I swear it was in Comic Sans or something like that. I didn't want to tell her that the entire story was terrible because I'm weak, so I just told her to check her capitals and punctuation and things like that. God, peer-reviewing someone's awful work is the worst. I don't know if it's necessary, but I always feel the need to tiptoe on direct issues like, "Oh, I don't think they actually had all that stuff back in 1896. I just want to tell them, I'm not trying to make any enemies, but your paper makes me want to commit Sudoku." I don't know if that last word was a typo or an intentional joke, but thank you, dear writer. Thank you very much. Now take the A- and get out of my sight. I'm studying to be an English teacher and had to do group peer reviews with classmates. One girl didn't have a thesis, didn't have any clear arguments, and had a 3-page paper that was 2 paragraphs long. The paper was supposed to be a proposal of how to fix an issue in higher education, and I couldn't even figure out what her problem was, and she had no proposal. The best part? After her and her friend went for the peer review, they left, leaving me and another girl to finish alone. When we got to the part to list feedback from our group, we both left clear comments about how our group left us. Not a professor, but I had to peer review a bit for my scientific writing course in my first year of college. It was a level 200 class, so there were a few sophomores and juniors. The way how it worked was that at the beginning of the semester, our professor had assigned us to do groups of 6. During the peer review sessions, she would staple the papers together according to group number and give it to different groups so we wouldn't grade our own group's papers. Around midterms, we had to write a mock proposal for a scientific field of our choice. Had to be at least 6 pages long with headings, abstracts, materials, hypothesis, etc. The one who wrote the best proposal got a Dunkin' Donuts gift card. I found one of the juniors' proposals and, oh my god. She only wrote 2 pages, had no discernible format, used a typewriter font, had no headings, and it was just her blabbering on about how herbal medicine helped her mental illness. There wasn't any real conclusion because from what I could tell, she didn't even have a hypothesis. There was so much wrong with the paper that I just moved on without writing anything. The real kicker is that she always promoted her self-published book on our class discussion board. I won the gift card though. I'm not a teacher, but I've read a ton of people's essays trying to help them edit. Holy crap, have I read some stupid papers. Here's a few excerpts from an essay I tried to edit but had to give up on. The essay was supposed to be about how people can be greedy. I don't quite know. Title: The Greedy Money Sharks and Fair Fishers. What's the meaning of greed as a selfish desire for something for power, good, and wealth? ? I told him to define greed. Defining your terms is important and he'd get marked off if he didn't. 1 point me and the guys had a guys' night, which we have a great time just being guys. Unfortunately, on that night there was the guy who was our friend, but now he's acquaintance because he activates his middle finger move. This one's just hilarious. Every time I try to read this aloud to my friends, I burst out laughing and can't finish the sentence.
For example, my rich friend went on a date with a Canadian girl. What did my rich friend had a good time with his date? Then unlucky event happened, he went to the bathroom because of the reason that doesn't involve with ditching. My friend accidentally drops his wallet and he went to the bathroom. She grabs his wallet and left the restaurant. My friend came back surprised and realized he lost his wallet. In other words, he's broke as heck and washes the dishes instead of sending him to jail. Ever since that date, he never dates a Canadian person or travels to Canada because in his point that Canadians are thieves. Maybe his friend is just stupid. So group tells the guy to pay the full share. The man disagrees, then he ran out of chills. And never seen again only until tomorrow. Never seen again? But then they saw him the next day. Although the tactic of avoiding paying the bill, full stop. Another way is to enhance their beauty within their appearance. For example, my cosplayer friend, redacted. A cosplayer is a person who dresses up as the character related to anime, cartoon, or video games. She always looks elegant and beautiful outfit of a character she cosplays as. When she wears her normal clothes, she still looks cute and natural. One night we get our boba drinks from a shop called Redacted. So I and Redacted ordered our drinks. I looked at her, she looks happy in a pretty way, then glanced at me. My cheeks started to get red. So I told her that I would pay for our drinks. I asked her why she has to look cute. She replied, "It's to make guys pay for my stuff and someone who I'd like." I kind of felt angry that she used me, but I was curious about the person who she liked. On the way to Redacted's house, I asked her, "So who do you like?" When we arrived at her house, she turns around and went to me, then pushed her smooth lips to my lips. Redacted steps back and replied, "I love you, baka." Baka means in Japanese is a fool. For example, people always take advantage of their men related to money. The woman's point of view of men are personal money spenders, and some men's point of view towards people is some kind of powerful god or someone in royalty. My thought on this subject are slavery and women being cheap. That be another way to avoid paying is taking advantage of your date and act like you're a spoiled royal brat. A woman who would do that, which is my mother because she doesn't work but take care of my sister but her husband does all the work. The worst part of my mother that she begs for money from me because I'm her child.
He doesn't have a job and all of his money comes from his parents. This was written by a freshman in college. For a lesson one time, we were supposed to grade some AP tests to get an idea of what the test would be like. The prompt was like, tell about an achievement you made, or something. I received a paper that went something like this. Growing up, I loved basketball. I would play it all the time. I really enjoyed the game, and I still play it now. I play basketball during the day. Sometimes I play basketball during the night too. Basketball is fun to play. Just on and on. About 100 different ways to say they play basketball. Anyways, I gave it a 2, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest, only due to the fact that it had no grammatical errors. Turns out the person received a frickin' 4. Taught at community college. Last paper for English 102 was an argument paper. I stated on the directions no stupid arguments like the Holocaust or the latest school shooting didn't happen. Student turns in a paper denying the school shooting that Alex Jones was recently in court for also denying. Gave her a 55%, which was an F, which put her final grade at an F because of a whole bunch of other crap the nut did and didn't do in class. One of the sentences was something along the lines of, "Who can blame the crisis actors for doing what they did? Every person just tries to help themselves." My time has come. I teach 10th grade English. One girl wrote the world's worst paper. It was incoherent, 5 pages long, had no claim, and was mostly plot summary. It was unreadable. I hated every second of it. I didn't know how to grade it, so I handed it to my co-teacher and was like, "You deal with this mess." He gave her a 55, which was generous. "So this is a failing paper, right?" We handed it back. I thought it was over. A different student turned in a paper, like a week late. I started grading the paper, I reached the second page, and I had this horrible epiphany. It was the same horrible paper. I couldn't compare the two papers because I didn't have the original, but it was the same unreadable garbage. I stopped reading, gave the second version a 45, and moved on. Then, an entirely different student who is not friends with either of the original students turned in a paper. It was like 2 weeks late, but I agreed to grade it. I got halfway through the first sentence before I realized it was the same gosh darn horrible paper. I almost died. These were all handwritten, so each student rewrote by hand all 5 pages of garbage. I know they were all copied because they had the same weird spelling errors. I have no idea why any of them thought distributing and copying a paper that had already failed would work. So I had to reread the exact same piece of garbage paper 3 times, and it was so unpleasant.
Hey Reddit, which double standard irritates you the most? The other day, I got a new iPhone from AT&T. I told the salesperson I didn't want to make any changes to my account. 2 days later, I get an email saying, "Congrats on signing up for cell phone insurance for $9.99 a month." Not once did this salesperson utter the words cell phone insurance. If I walk into an AT&T every month and steal $9.99, I would go to jail. When a salesperson steals an extra $9.99 a month from me, they call it cross-selling and don't see anything wrong with it. Work over 12 to 15 hours a day to get your project in by deadline is fine, but don't you dare show up 5 minutes late the next day. Paid based on a 40-hour week, trend towards 50 to 60 hours on average. Edit, should point out that I love the job and I feel I get paid a good rate. Just annoyed after getting called out by the sales staff who don't have to pull extended shifts. I work for a small business, 8 employees. Smokers, 4 of the 8 of us, are allowed smoke breaks whenever they feel like it. We aren't given regular coffee breaks or lunch, during which they aren't required to punch out or put anything other than, and I quote management here, a reasonable time limit on. I don't smoke, but I do like a bit of fresh air every now and then, so I go outside for 3 to 5 minutes and check my email or read the news on my phone. This is completely unacceptable to my boss because, and let me quote her directly again, "Phones are an addiction that waste company time." I asked her why smokers aren't held to the standard, and I was told, quote, "Smokers need to smoke. You don't need to read the news." A double standard imposed on me by my mother-in-law. Conversation happened earlier. Mother-in-law, if I ever catch you cheating on your wife, I'll cut you with a machete. Me. Silent. Neighbor, but Mother Lily, your sons are horn dogs and have different children from different mothers. Are you going to cut them too? Mother-in-law, now why would I cut my own sons? P.S. I don't cheat on my wife. My hippie friends who believe modern medicine is evil and that chemicals are dangerous, to the point of never taking paracetamol or even believing things like vaccines are bad, Maybe I use the word friends too broadly, but they don't give a crap about snorting white powder that they've bought from a guy they barely know, which is very likely 20% actual white powder and 80% miscellaneous white powder. The irony is that most of that miscellaneous white powder is probably paracetamol. 5-minute smoke break? Sure. 5 minutes for fresh air? Screw you. Get back to work. Acknowledging the existence of children trying to interact with me. I'm a guy. Example. Was a cashier and this kid with some mental disorder, Downs I think, always loved to talk to me when his parents were going through cash. His dad said he always remembered me. Long story short, got hauled into the office by my boss and I was told my behavior was inappropriate for talking to a kid about food. Manager, you need to be a team player and help your team out. Sits in her office all day not doing jack squat. People, I want more art, music, movies, and other forms of entertainment. Also people, I don't want to pay for any of it or it isn't worth my money. Saw this one firsthand in a store once that made me laugh. Mother, all you do is waste your time playing video games. Teenage kid, you're on Facebook as much as I'm playing games. Mother, long pause. That's different. Parent, you're wasting so much time playing those stupid video games. Followed by the parent watching TV from the moment they get home till they go to bed. This one drives me up a wall because this is what my parents like to do, specifically my mom. She doesn't do it anymore, but back when I was growing up and trying to make friends and actually interact on social spaces, she didn't understand that because it was all online that, somehow that doesn't mean anything. You have to go out and make friends. Mom, I'm making friends. Now that I have a job and make money using the internet, she doesn't yell at me, but it's that's still worth something. Mom and dad stereotype. My husband is an excellent father, but people always ask who's watching the kids when they aren't with me. Their dad? People. Oh, so he's babysitting today? Me. No, he's taking care of his freaking kids. When my political party does X messed up thing, it's okay. When yours does it, it's wrong. We won't hire you unless you have 5 years of experience working this exact job. Your uncle's cousin already works here? Welcome aboard, person with 0 experience. This post is from 6 years ago, and I like how this has happened so often that we now have a word for it, which is Nepo baby. As a teacher, there are times I would love to be able to put an arm around a student who is crying, or have a student come back to my room for extra help if they are struggling. But I'm male, so that can't happen. We are literally told by our administration never to do any of that if we are male. I understand the concern, but to the point where you literally can't offer any support to a student because of what might be taken out of context, that's doing way more harm than good. Dancing. I don't like to go dancing because I don't understand what you're supposed to do. You just dance. Do whatever feels right. Does dance. No, not like that. There's no one right way to dance. Just as there's no one wrong way to subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. As always, thanks for watching. I'm a lady. I can't stand how men aren't allowed to be caregivers, or like children. Man can't comfort a child or be at a park with his own without being accused of a crime. Man wants to stay at home with the kids? He's lazy and making the woman do all the work. It's crap. Equality means that men should be allowed to do the same roles as women and vice versa. I'm a male substitute teacher, and when I first started, another male sub told me, do not ever spend a second with a child by yourself. He also said, do not ever get too close to the kids and keep your hands visible at all times. A week later, I was caught with the student alone because she needed a pass to go to the nurse right before recess. The female principal had a talk with me and told me she was telling the parents of the child. Then I got fired. I emailed the vice superintendent and let him know I'm 18 and I've just graduated from the school district I work for. He said they weren't accusing me of anything, and after me explaining if they weren't accusing me of anything, they can't fire me. They gave me my job back. Have never and will never sub at that school again, and no other elementary schools at that. Edit. This was in Texas near Dallas. My district allows subs at 18 with a high school diploma, but it's a district-by-district decision. The principal of this school made it very clear to me that it was because I was a male teacher and the student was female. I'm in college now studying to become a graphic design/AV teacher in preferably high school. Before the incident, I worked all ages, K through 12th grade. After, I refused to work with elementary, and they prohibited me from working with the high school after finding out I had only just graduated. So I work mostly with 5th through 8th grade. Anytime I take my daughters to the park, it is painfully obvious that I am excluded or frowned at if I'm too close to their kids. It especially happens when mom groups are there together. It's not my fault that they're too busy sitting on the bench chatting to notice that their kids are now on top of the swing set and they didn't notice until I helped them down. You have no idea how it feels to be in a movie theater and have a mother get up and move her kids when you sit down. Or to be walking to your car and have a woman look over her shoulder, pull out her keys and pepper spray, then start power walking towards her car in fear. So many other similar things like this occur as well. It's basically someone calling you a criminal just because you are going about your normal life. When Aphrodite lies around naked in a giant shell, she's a goddess. But when I do it, I'm drunk and no longer welcome at the aquarium. Old people have this opinion that all young people are rude, yet in reality are the most rude, selfish, and impatient people you will ever meet. I live in the UK. It's amazing how they think they're being perfectly reasonable, but they're actually being completely biased and outright hypocritical without even realizing it. Edit, I know the feeling for those of you who work in retail and have to deal with these types of people on a regular basis. I work on checkouts in a store that, quite appropriately, rhymes with Painsbury's, and I get the same abuse. I just want to say that even though people give you crap, it is absolutely not an easy job to do. So well done for always keeping your cool. It's hard sometimes, I know. Edit 2. I am in no way implying all old people are jerkwads, but there's definitely a large portion of them who seem to follow this bias where I'm from.
Ugh, you millennials are so self-centered. All you do is whinge. You have no regard for your elders. Shame on you. You're going to be working in retail all your life. Do you know how to do anything?
Susan, a 55-year-old who refuses to leave the store until her expired $1 off coupon is accepted. It's because at that point in life, you stopped giving a crap about what people think entirely. Some people take that and act like a jerkwad because they don't care if someone is affected. Some people go the other way and figure there's no point stressing about things that don't matter. My two grandmothers were the opposite ends of these spectrums. One would scream at the bus driver because the price of a ticket had gone up since she first moved here. 50 years ago, Nan. Let it go, love. And one would happily sit in a restaurant if her food took 40 minutes to come out because, quote, I haven't got anywhere to be anyway, and it's nice to be out. In my building, there's this old lady. We always said good morning to one another or smiled, so she obviously knew I lived here. To enter my building, you need a key. Once it was raining and windy outside, and my key was lost somewhere in my bag under a pile of books, papers, and God knows what else. So I was freezing, searching frantically through my bag for the key when I see her coming out. I think, great, she'll let me in. She went out of the building and closed the door behind her while pushing me out so I could not come in, all the time looking at me suspiciously. I can't let you in if you don't have the key, she said. A couple of days later, the same situation occurred, except it was me coming out and she was looking for her key. I seized the opportunity for revenge and did exactly the same thing, closing the door in front of her face and telling her I couldn't let her in without a key. She was still screaming obscenities at me while I walked away. WTF? You reap what you sow. If you won't respect me, I won't respect you. Which doesn't sound like a double standard, but when you consider what context it's used in, it changes. My father used to say this when I wouldn't do exactly as he commanded me to. The issue is that there are levels of respect. While it might sound like if you won't treat me with a certain amount of respect, I won't show the same amount back, but it is executed as, if you won't respect me as an authority, I won't respect you as a basic human. Letting them treat you with way less respect than you treated them while still being fair in their eyes. If a girl sleeps with tons of guys, she has a reputation, but if I do it, all of a sudden I'm gay? Went to school with a guy who was caught making out with a dude and filleting another dude, claimed he wasn't gay. He has since come out as gay and no one cared because we knew it all along. Edit, the filleting and making out were two separate incidents. I'd have been more impressed if it was at the same time. Really annoys me when people complain about globalization but won't let go any of the benefits. People complain viciously about jobs being outsourced to Asia, but will fight to the death for their right to buy a toaster for $4. This right here. My extended family cracks me up because they all work for big three automakers, and more power to them, but will complain about not, quote, buying American. Never mind the fact that automotive is a very global industry and the most, quote, American car pound for pound is actually a Toyota because of how Toyota sources its components. Women can wear a million different cuts of shirts, pants, skirts, or dresses and still be business casual. Men, all we get is long pants and long sleeve or short sleeve button-downs. Oh, and maybe a polo. Screw that. It's too freaking hot here 90% of the time. I at least want to wear shorts. Been there. Had a woman for a boss who said men may only wear dress shoes and pants and button-down shirts, and we had zero contact with customers. Women could wear what they wanted. One very hot summer day, all the ladies were wearing sundresses and sandals, so I asked why women had a different set of standards. Her only reply, men's feet stink. If skirts are in the dress code, wear one. I did it one freaking time. I was called into the boss's office before my shift even started. He asked why. I said it was hot, wearing this was cooler, and within the dress code. He said, "You've made your point. The dress code will be amended to allow for shorts." By the first break of the morning, the new dress code was on the wall of the break room, and I was, quote, the hero in the paisley print skirt. Malicious compliance has been a specialty of mine ever since then. When/if you are 35 plus, regardless of career success, if you don't have a family and children by then, as a man, you're typically just labeled as a bachelor still enjoying the single life. When you're a woman, it's like you're some depressing spinster who has forsaken their gender by not fulfilling their expected mom duties that are unfortunately ingrained in the woman identity the media has created. Screw that momopia. Edit. It's really fascinating that a lot of people immediately assume that these fictitious people both want kids, but, quote, lost the game, or, quote, timed out of their biological clock. The point I'm trying to make is that a child-free life shouldn't be considered a you lost or ran out of time situation at all. Reproducing shouldn't be expected, and it shouldn't affect one's self-image. This is probably my favorite post on this thread. As someone who's a member of the LGBTQ community, Happy Pride Month, by the way, the topic of having children hardly comes up within our circles. A lot of the time, we don't want them, and that's fine. There are plenty of people who do that for us anyway. For the people in the community who do want them, that's perfectly fine too. It should never affect the image of someone if they start a family or not. Being a teenager. Hey, you're almost an adult now. You must be responsible for yourself and do things on your own. What the heck? Do exactly what I tell you. Don't try to make decisions by yourself. Oh my god, that nerd is way too into that video game. Now excuse me, but I need to go spend a crap ton of time and money on Clash of Clans. I know that most people are thinking gender politics, but as a Christian, I'm most bothered when others believers rail against Sharia law and Muslim fundamentalism while trying to impose their own fundamentalist legal vision on others. Edit, I don't mean to equate extreme Islamic fundamentalism with American Christian fundamentalism. I could have drawn a more common example from my own life as a teacher. My pastor has been very open about how I should be able to share my faith with my public school students in a way that he would not tolerate from a Muslim teacher. That's the double standard at its heart, but in a less extreme form. He and many others want to preserve prayer in schools, Christmas, and the 10 Commandments, but they do not want likewise expression for other beliefs. Also, I've spent my day teaching about lynchings in U.S. history, so I'm not in the mood to pretend that Christian fundamentalism can't get as extreme as Sharia. It's not the point I'm arguing, but it's not an invalid point in modern history. Don't trust Muslims, they'll force Sharia law on you. Now vote for this nice man who wants to ban gay marriage and teach creationism in school. I've never been ashamed of being a Christian, but I've sure as heck been ashamed of being in the same religion as some of these people. Men don't cry. Every single instance that says men aren't supposed to show emotions, tears, or anything that could be considered a, quote, weakness ticks me off to no end. Bonus irritation points if that's considered a sign of homosexuality, as if that's a weakness. Sadness isn't exclusively feminine. Bottling up emotions is one of the most toxic things I've ever done, and I'm probably still doing it unconsciously due to my upbringing. I'm certain that most men are, and that's messed up. Female friend shares a post on Facebook with the title, "Hot male French farmers pose topless for calendar because why not?" The comments and amount of likes the post received baffled me. If I was to share a post of a load of female models, because why not, I would be ridiculed or called perverted. And I know that 10 to 20 of my male friends wouldn't be posting comments like, "Heart eyes emoji, January though." Girl, how tall are you? Me, 6'1", why? Girl, oh good, because I only date at least 6 feet tall guys. Me, how much do you weigh? Girl, not your business. Girl on matches. Probably my own. That's to say, noticing the hypocrisy in my beliefs and actions. If I can't call BS on myself, then I don't have much of a right to call it on others. Hopefully, I'm arcing toward improvement, but I have a lot of work to do. People complaining online about people using their phone while driving, by taking a photo of that person while they themselves are driving. I can do what offends you because it's freedom. You can't do what offends me because it's not politically correct. Ooh, the urge to attend a conservative Christian family dinner and call my grandma, grandpa, and my grandpa, grandma. Now we'll see how they really feel about pronouns. Oh, you know I'm not your grandpa, right? And I'm not your grandma. So you like being called what you prefer, huh? Most people give the older generations grief about using computers. In my experience, I've seen plenty of millennials who can use their phone but don't understand how to use basic office software. In my experience, nothing 15 minutes in the help of Google can't solve. Your coworkers are absolutely free to joke about how they're going to drink a glass of wine or a whole bottle by myself when they finally get home from work. If I mention I take a couple hits of weed from a vaporizer before going to bed, they'll think I'm an addict that can't make it through life without a crutch. Talking about the historic slave trade in/from Africa is encouraged. Talking about non-African slave trade, example, the Irish being sold to the Caribbean, I know is called indentured servitude, makes you a racist. My SO and I are of different ethnicities, but we agreed that it's pretty messed up. We can't figure out why people, black or white, have such an issue with this. People get really angry about it. I'm American, so maybe that has something to do with it? Can't we just agree slavery is a crappy thing to do all around, no matter what you call it? Women are allowed to wear men's clothes, and nobody cares too much. Being a tomboy is normal. Men aren't allowed to wear women's clothes in public. That's too weird for everyone else. Being against abortion, but giving absolutely no craps about the mother's health/financial situation and the child's health or well-being. We blatantly accept lies from our corrupt governments. When whistleblowers reveal information on said governments, they're traitors. Yeah, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. The reason why whistleblowers are given a complimentary deep tissue head massage from the CIA when they expose corruption is because those powers want to stay unopposed and will do whatever it takes to keep it that way. Late to the party, but my girlfriend and I have one that she finds funny and I just find irritating. Both of us train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's like wrestling with chokeholds and attempted limb snapping for the uninitiated. As with any combat sport, you get roughed up all the time, and anyone who trains a few times a week constantly has bruises. Bruises on the shins, arms, and wrists are especially common. If people see either of our bruises and feel the need to comment, the reaction is very different for me being a guy and her being a girl. To me, oh, did you get in a fight? To her, who's hurting you? There are hotlines you can call. This happened with me and my fiancé with different sports. I've been playing rugby since I was 14, and he plays hockey. You get banged up playing both those things. Once I took an elbow to the face and broke my nose. He took me to the ER, where they saw me with a broken nose and his black eye from a game a few days before, and separated us under the guise of, quote, needing to look at me alone. I got told repeatedly there were resources for me to leave if I needed to, financial or otherwise. Meanwhile, he got interrogated by a nurse in the waiting area over my nose and how it happened. Never mind the fact that we were both roughed up, and if we were fighting, he could have easily been the victim defending himself in this situation. They just saw a man who's older than me and registered it as him beating the crap out of me, and me afraid to leave him.
What was your cringiest encounter with a nice guy? Met a nice guy over OKC a couple of years ago. I gave him my number after we chatted for a bit and talked about possibly meeting. When he suggested we meet at a local elementary school in the middle of the night, I noped the frick out and told him it was nice talking to him, but I didn't really want to meet anymore. He kept trying to convince me by saying he would buy me gifts. He really likes me and thinks we could hit it off. When I told him no, he blew up and called me the B word, a whore, the usual. He tells me that I now owe him $15 because he'd already bought me a present for our first date and that I needed to meet him right now to give him his money. Or I could meet with him and have a good time and forget about all of this. Blocked his number right away and didn't hear from him until the next day when he calls me from a different number. When I picked up, he acted pleasant and asked me what time we were going to meet today for our date. I told him to F off and blocked him again. Then I get a text a couple of hours later from another fricking phone number saying that if I don't meet him, he was going to take his own life. After a bit of unnecessarily dramatic conversation, I basically told him that I didn't care if he did that, he was psychotic and needed to leave me alone. I blocked him and forgot about it. Fast forward to about 6 months ago when I get a text from an unknown number. I knew exactly who it was when I read the text. I have $20 and a fun night planned for us. Want to meet sometime soon? Miss you. Blocked it, changed my number, never giving it out to a stranger again. There was a guy in high school who had a crush on me. He was never shy about it, and from day one he made me really uncomfortable. He had asked me out multiple times a day, always in front of my friends, who didn't help because they'd always egg me on to go out with him. I was the new kid in school and they'd all been friends with him since elementary. When I kept saying no, he assumed it was because I was seeing someone else, so he started telling people that I was sleeping with random guys at school. I wasn't. I had no interest in dating any of the boys I went to school with. Anytime I tried to tell him to stop doing that, he, and anyone else around for that matter, said he was just joking and needed to lighten up. It all came to a head at the homecoming dance my junior year. He was a senior, so it was his last homecoming. Apparently, the day before homecoming, he told one of my friends that he'd asked me out to the dance and I'd said yes. He had not asked me, I never had any intention of going to the dance. He kept going on to my friend about how special he wanted it to be, that he spent all of his money on tickets, gas, new shoes, and a corsage. My friend was so excited for him that she went over to his house the day of homecoming and helped him get everything ready. She also told all of our friends what was going on, so everyone was under the impression I was going to the dance with him. Let me also add, no one checked with me that I was going to the dance, so this was all going on without my knowledge. He told everyone that I was going to get dropped off by my parents, so he and all of my friends waited outside for me. They waited for 3 hours. Apparently, anytime my friends told him to come inside and that I wasn't coming, he'd start tearing up and say, "Just 5 more minutes." So of course I went to show up to school on Monday and everyone was furious at me. None of my friends wanted to talk to me. I sat alone at lunch for 3 days completely confused about what was going on before some girl I'd never talked to before asked me why I'd stood him up. So I went up to the guy when he was alone, asked what the frick he had done, and he just started laughing hysterically and said, "If you agree to go out with me, I'll tell everyone it was just a misunderstanding." Never talked to the guy again. It permanently damaged my friendships with several people because they thought I was a massive piece of crap to this guy who they thought was really sweet. Holy God, what a manipulative moron. There's just so much premeditated destruction of the girl's social life on display that he deserves whatever badness life throws his way. I had to get a ride from a friend my junior year of high school. For some reason, I didn't have my car. I don't remember all the details. He stopped about a mile from my house and pulled over into the side of the road. He had told me he had had a dream where we had made out and that I was a really good kisser in it, and he decided I could either walk home from there or kiss him. Holy crap, do I have a story for this. So I'm a big dude, and at my first semester at university, I came in as a junior. And there was this guy that was just way too freaking into me, and he was super creepy about it. The dude would just sit uncomfortably close to me, like if I was sitting on a chair, he'd sit on the armrest, or if I was talking to someone, he'd place himself directly between me and the person I was talking to. It was annoying. He would always bring up discussions to make sure everyone in the room knew he was bi, and ask everyone their orientation, and every dude would answer straight and he'd awkwardly flirt with me or some other dude. After months of this, we were playing ping pong and we were getting in a stupid argument where he was just flat out wrong. It had something to do with game engines and pixel art. It was stupid. He would hate to admit he was wrong, but he decided that this was a good point to show me he was able to accept defeat in an argument. He goes, "Fred, I have Asperger's. It's really hard for me to look someone in the eye. I can only do it if I'm really mad at the person or if I really want to screw them. But don't worry, I'm not mad at you." All while staring right into my face. I just put my stuff down and walked away. I was like 19 and working my third shift at a gas station, casually sweeping the floor. The door opens and I hear that ding, so I look up and make eye contact with some guy. I can't explain what was going on in the guy's head, but it was like he thought it was some kind of slow-mo movie situation and he staggered back, gasping, and widening his eyes and staring at me. I'm not the kind of person to notice this kind of stuff in other people. I felt like I was reading a scene from Twilight in my head. I went behind the checkout counter, he grabbed his Red Bull or whatever, he kept obviously looking at me in shock and shaking his head like he was trying to psych himself up for something. Ladies, you know that feeling when you know someone wants to catch your attention and talk to you, but you're trying to keep it casual? This went on for like 20 minutes and I couldn't accomplish anything because I'm waiting for this dude to check out. Anyway, so he walks up to the checkout super dramatically, I check him out, he stares the whole time and finally says, "I never expected to see such a beautiful woman at a gas station. This is fate, you shouldn't be working here. I just can't help myself, I have to ask you to go out with me." I said, "Sorry, I have a boyfriend." He seriously looked enraged. He clenched his fists and gave me this overly dramatic, scary look, grabbed his stuff and stormed out the door. He moved his car so the bright headlights were facing the front of the store and sat there until the next customer came, probably an hour later. Honestly, I wasn't too scared, it was just really like, what? I just wanted to finish my list of duties at this crappy gas station and live my life. But some Joe concocted a bizarre dream scenario in his head and somehow that was my fault. Gotta love the sheer stupidity of thinking both that you're way too pretty to be there, but then being shocked and enraged that you could possibly have a boyfriend. What a nutcase. A guy sat down next to me at a coffee shop and asked why I didn't have a boyfriend. That was his opening line, so I told him I did, and he immediately looked appalled, demanding to know where he was, and I was like, "Bro, do I need to wear a sign or something?" Nice guy said he was doing me a favor by trying to stick his hands down my pants because he was the only one that would give me experience, being the size that I was. Joke's on him, I lost 65 pounds after that and turned my life around completely. Had a very difficult, traumatic end to a long-term live-in engagement. He went to jail, I decided to go to Europe to backpack for the summer. Best friend, male, agreed to come along and was very aware that this was a post-breakup getaway, to clear my head and have fun. He flew out ahead of me to visit family. I arrived at the airport to see him waiting for me in Europe on bended knee, ring, flowers and all. I was furious and that friendship was destroyed. Vacation was equal parts horrendously awkward and tense and amazing, but ended with him drunkenly ranting about it all in a hostel one night, ultimately becoming inappropriate and then physically aggressive toward me, and a group of strange hostel bunkies helping to quietly pack my stuff while he was finally passed out and get me to the airport and home immediately. I haven't seen him since, about 8 years now. I guess in his mind it was the perfect cliché movie moment to begin our lives together. He had 10 years to speak up, but felt that the very first moment I step on European soil to begin my newfound freedom and let go of it all was the absolute best moment to inform me that he had lied essentially about our platonic friendship for a decade and wanted an immediate transition to being lifelong partners, right then and there. My stomach is churning even now thinking about it, and of course people gathered around and cheered. I believe that's what it was that infuriated me the most. It's humiliating to be put on the spot like that in front of so many strangers, expecting and hoping to witness a fairy tale moment. I had to loudly say something like, "Come on, stand up, you're joking right, brother friend. Quit playing around, let's go celebrate my 7-year-long relationship ending last week, and go party my freedom now. Ha 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 ha." Of course, I'm the bad girl in that situation, and he's just cliché hopelessly in love best friend, good guy, finishing last as always. Someone even booed me. Met a guy at a gathering at a mutual friend's place and ended up getting stuck talking to him all night. Night ends and I don't give it another thought. Couple of weeks later, he calls my house. I didn't give him my last name or my phone number. Since he now has my number, he also knows my address and starts showing up at my house at weird times, sometimes with his equally creepy sister. Fast forward a few years and I haven't lived at home for at least a year. He shows up, Dad answers the door and just tells him I'm not in, not that I don't live there or anything. Later that same night, Dad lets the dog out for a pee before bed. Dog disappears into the backyard, chasing something he really wants to catch. Thinks it's a skunk or something until he hears the gate on the neighbor's fence open and close quickly. Dog has chased a person out of the backyard. My old bedroom window faced our backyard. We don't know for sure, but I think my dog chased that frickin' creep out of our yard. Screw you, Adam. I don't think we have a catch-all name for these so-called nice guys of the world in the same way that we have Chad for D-bags and bold players. But yeah, for the purpose of addressing all the nice guys in this collection, screw all of you, Adams. Drinking too much on the first date in order to stay over at my apartment and sleep on my couch, and then try to worm into my bed at 3 a.m. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I knew this kid in 9th grade who seemed like a nice enough dude. Let's call him Frank. We became friends over our mutual love of video games, with him seeming to be a lot more invested in the friendship, but like I said, he seemed harmless. One day, I invite him over to the house to play games on my PlayStation. We have a good enough time, him continuously talking about how he's so happy to have a friend who likes video games and is a girl. Red flag, I know. I got to school the next day, and during class, my friends tell me that Frank went and bragged to anyone that would hear that I invited him over and that he heard I was super easy and bought a condom. Just in case. Being an angry and petty teenager, I walk up to him during lunch period in front of a bunch of guys and called him out for what he said. He began stuttering, but before he could finish, I told him he was a creep and to never talk to me again. Cut to a few months later, and I'm called into the vice principal's office. I get there and she asked me if I was friends with Frank, and I responded that we used to be. She asked what ended our friendship, and I explained the situation to her. She looks at me and says, "That's not what he told us, but I think I know who's telling the truth." Turns out that after I ended the friendship, Frank fixated on another girl only to discover that she had a boyfriend. Frank decided the best course of action was to get rid of the boyfriend by pulling a knife on the kid in the hallway and threatening him. Security, of course, gets him and discovers that he only had a butter knife. Still, he threatened someone, so he was called into the principal's office. Whereupon, he explained that the only reason he pulled the knife on this guy was because he was so heartbroken after I dumped him following our 6-month anniversary, and fell in love with this other girl because she treated him right. He got suspended, but since it was close to the end of the school year, he just never came back and transferred schools the following school year. Good riddance. I considered him a friend. Stayed at his apartment when visiting his town. He slept in the living room, I in the bedroom. When it got late, he started making jokes about how he had hidden the bedroom key and that I should get ready for him. I spent the night half awake and fully dressed from sheer fear. In the morning, I packed and wanted to leave, but he wouldn't let me go without having a goodbye kiss. He physically blocked the door so I couldn't get out. I tried to play it off and somehow managed to squeeze by him without getting kissed, but it was a terrifying experience. And that was the end of our friendship. I've got a weird one. A good buddy of mine was moving across the country. I'd known him for a while and he was very gay. And I'm not, but we were still pretty close friends. He had his going-away party at a very gay bar here in Austin. No big, I'm comfortable with my heterosexuality. I'll go and have a few drinks and dance a little and go home with my girlfriend, who went to the party with me. Well, we get there and about 20 minutes in, she gets a text that her friend's sister has been in a bad car accident. She leaves to go help her friend. I decide I'll stay for another hour or so before heading home. I'm at the bar having a drink and I start to feel tired, so I'm going to go outside and call an Uber. As I'm outside, one guy from the party group, but who I didn't know at all, asked what was going on, and I told him I was leaving. He was like, "Dude, I live right by you, I'll drop you off." I didn't think about it at the time, but he would have no clue where I lived because we had barely been introduced at the party. I get in his car and as we turn the corner he puts his hand on my leg. I kinda snap out of it and say, "You know what, man? I'm uncomfortable here, why don't you let me out of the car?" I get the whole, "Nah bro, I'll get you home safe, it's fine. I won't stop." Doesn't pull over, comes up to a stoplight, I try to force open the door and the door won't open. He won't look at me and by this point I'm saying very forcibly to let me go. I normally conceal carry, but not this night since I was in a bar, and I was drinking. Both illegal to carry a gun while doing so. After a few more lights and silence where I realize that he's taking me somewhere against my will, I realize that I have a window breaker on my keychain. It's one of those combo thingies that can cut a seatbelt and break a window if your car is underwater. So I pull it and immediately break the passenger side window at the next light and start crawling out. Luckily, there were like 8 people that saw it happen and came running over. He still wouldn't unlock the door. When he saw them running over to help, he opened the door and pushed me out and sped off. He was in a stolen car and no one knew him at the party. He had just started associating with our group early on and I thought he was part of the party. It was scary as heck. I worked for a few years at a children's museum. There was this single dad with 3 daughters who was cute but way too old for me, especially at the time when I was 19 and he was about 35. I also got a weird vibe from him, but he was always very nice, if a little uncomfortable. His daughters were adorable. The following events happened over a 6-month period. One day, some guest approaches me and asks if I've seen this missed connections on Craigslist about the museum. It was about me. The guy was writing about things we'd talked about and was saying how good we would be together, etc. Thinking back, I honestly think that she must have been friends with the guy, because it was too weird that she approached me out of all the other workers and then asked me what I thought about the guy who wrote the ad. Later, he found me on Facebook and tried to add me. I didn't add him, and the next time he was in the museum, He followed me room to room and just glared at me from afar, not talking to me. Super uncomfortable. I thought it would be easier to just add him, so I did. Then he starts commenting really weird and creepy stuff on my photos, like a gif of Pikachu biting his lip or just fap 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 fap. So I decided enough is enough and deleted him. Then he tries to win me back or something. He brings a wrapped canvas to the museum and gives it to my boss, saying it would be too weird to just give it to me. And my boss calls me down later and makes me open it in front of everyone. It was a very fun workplace and we loved to rip on each other. And it was a painting of one of my photos on Facebook. I was so mortified I put it away, but one of my co-workers, and also my best friend, replaced the clock in the bathroom with my portrait because she's a dick. While it was funny, I also asked my boss to watch out for him, so from then on I didn't see him anymore and blocked him on Facebook. So I think I'm safe. My nice guy said he'd take his own life unless I became his girlfriend. Nice guy from college, we're talking about trench coat and fedora, fingerless gloves, pathetically sleazy smile, the whole shebang, in a tropical country at that, who kept trying to talk to me even as I was clearly trying to do my homework. Now, I was okay with multitasking, I could really do homework and listen and respond to him, but he wouldn't have it. Hey, you know what? I really hate it when women, yes, not people, women, specifically, ignore me. I was dumbfounded but also really offended, so I shot back that I was listening to him even if I wasn't looking at him. No, but when I'm talking to someone, I want them to look at me. Friend overhears this and went off on him faster than I did. He left me alone after that. Not as terrible as the other answers here, but that was my first real taste of it. As usual with the darker and more negative subjects that we post here sometimes, I find myself grasping for literally anything to be positive about. So well done to your friend for giving Creepo McFedora a piece of their mind. Stick by those friends. A co-worker gave me a ride to the train station because I'd missed my bus when I was a trainee. It's a 10 to 15 minute ride and I thought it was nice of him, but I didn't think much of it. I thought he was just helping out. When we were still in the car, he then mentioned wanting to invite me for a drink one day, then offered to drive me all the way back home. He was living near the train station we were heading to, and it would have made a 45-minute drive to get to my place. I declined because I felt uncomfortable, and because without traffic, the train was actually more convenient for me. He mistaked my refusal for politeness or just outright ignored it and insisted, saying it wasn't bothering him to drive all the way here. At this point, I didn't care about him. I was just starting to get scared. He insisted, and I had to argue and practically begged him to just drop me at the train station, finally mentioning that my dad was waiting for me anyway at the terminus, and pretended we could have a drink someday, and he let it go. But it all happened as we were driving onto the highway, so I felt trapped and it was really uncomfortable. Thankfully, it was my last week here, and I avoided him the last few days that I worked. He let me sleep over because I lived an hour away and we'd been drinking, and he pulls the old, "You're really lucky I'm a nice guy. Most guys would force themselves on you right now, but I don't because I'm nice. You're really lucky," despite us having been normal platonic friends for a few months before this, and me having established a few times that I wasn't interested in anything else with him. I was on a Discord server and spoke in a voice chat frequently. One time this dude came in and didn't speak, only in text chat. He kept putting himself down for attention, so I told him that he shouldn't worry, blah blah blah, just to be polite and to try to get him to stop. This went on for quite a bit, and I think he might have taken that politeness as something more. I'd already told most people on the server that I don't swing that way, and he got all down about it and literally complained to everyone on the server that he had a crush on her, but she hates me. Fast forward an hour or so, and he PMs me saying that it's actually me he likes. I told him that I didn't like him back and that I was gay, but he threatened to take his own life, so I told him to stop being so manipulative and to pull himself together. I was at a bar and coffee shop drinking tea when this guy, a friend of a friend, came and sat down next to me with 2 shots of whiskey. I told him no thank you, I'm not drinking, and he said, "Wow, you're really making me angry. I'm being fricking nice to you and you're being really fricking rude." I said no thank you again. He kept going off about how rude I was and what a nice guy he was. Finally, I told him that I'd take the shot and throw it in his eyes if he didn't walk away. He walked away finally. Prick. Nice guy asks me out in high school on the bus and I declined. He gives me the silent treatment after that. The next day he appears in my friend group with his arms encasing one of my friends who looked clearly uncomfortable. He tells her he loves her and how great of a woman she is to be giving him a chance to treat her like a princess. I talked to her after, and he had asked her over and over to date him until she said yes. She was a very nice girl, and I felt bad for her. I told her what happened, and that seemed to give her the confidence to stop the dating after only a few hours. We never saw him much after that, thank goodness.
Late night store clerks. What are the strangest things that have happened on the job? I work nights at a gas station in a pretty good neighborhood in New Hampshire, so usually it's pretty boring. One night, I did have a customer really creep me out. I was just getting ready to close down the store when a little old man came in. He was small and dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt. I made the usual small talk of asking him how his day was going. Then, as I was handing him his change, he firmly grabbed my wrist, made direct eye contact with me, and said, "Hell is a real place. And the devil has already got his hand on you, girl. Be careful." I worked third shift at a Sheetz. For those of you who don't know, it's a gas station / convenience store / fast food place. On multiple occasions, I have been cussed out because we discontinued pickle chips. I've had people tell me to screw off, break things, demand to call corporate, etc. Drunk people love pickle chips. Edit, I get it, sober people love pickle chips too. I've never been a store clerk, but I was lucky enough to witness the following story. 7-Eleven, circa 1996. A guy walks up to the surly clerk, who seemed to work 25 hours a day, and asks, "Do you sell eggs by the half dozen?" Clerk, "No, you have to buy a dozen." Guy, "I only need 6. Clerk, "I don't care. You get 12 or you get 0. Without saying another word, the guy walks back to get his dozen eggs, pays, and walks out. Then he throws his 6 unwanted eggs at the store window before driving off. I worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift in an all-night garage for a few months when I was 18. There was this weird Vietnamese dude who always drove a white Honda Prelude and always filled up with 666 pounds of petrol. He wore the same pair of cutoffs every time, with blotches and bruises all over his legs, and used to literally wander in, leaning against the displays, pick up as many yogurts as he could carry, pay with the 50-pound note, and stagger out. One time he came in with these 2, obviously prostitute women, who were draped all over him with the biggest pupils I have ever seen. They stood at the counter while I scanned all their yogurts, and he spoke for the first and only time. Staring at me, said to the women, "She can join us, can't she?" One of the women looked at me and said, "You'll make a lot more money if you come with us, darling." I nervously laughed, took their cash, and they left, grinning in silence. The place I worked had a monitor/camera that showed you on it as you walked it. It was like 10 minutes before closing, and a guy walks in and just starts rapping into the camera and acting like he's shooting a music video. He went through an entire song. A man came in 10 times within a single hour. He kept leaving and coming back without buying a single thing. Finally, on the 10th time, he comes up to the counter with a box of tampons. I proceed to ask him, "Rough night?" To which he responded, "I really don't want to talk about it." Had a guy pull up to the pump, unhooked it wanting post-pay. Our policy said not to authorize it between midnight and 5 a.m., which was prepay only. I announced this to the dude over the loudspeaker. I'm pretty sure he was wasted. He continued to get more and more belligerent. When he started beating the pumps with the nozzle/hose, I called the cops. Dude starts banging on the door. Locked, no way he could get in. Can't, gets frustrated, and finally just whips his deal out and starts wagging it in the general direction of the store. The CCTV is getting all this, so I just start laughing my butt off. Then, the cops pull up, and 2 deputies put this poor, drunk, deal-wagging man away in the back of a police car. I quit a few months after that. I worked at a small convenience store in the early 1990s. They had one of those fry delis that had chicken, JoJo's, corn dogs, burritos, etc. This particular night, I had run out of burritos and chicken. I also shut the thing down and cleaned it all out about an hour before closing. About 5 minutes before I was closing up, a guy walked in and asked for some burritos. I told him I was out of them, and that I was just about to close and the fryer was shut down. He walked around the store for a minute. I assumed he was looking for something else to buy, and then he came up to the counter, pulled out a knife, and told me if I didn't cook him some burritos, he was going to stab me. I freaked out, but told him I had none to cook. I showed him the freezer and told him I would happily cook anything he wanted from it, but he will see I was out of burritos. He looked at it for about a minute, turned to me, and said, "You really are out." I replied, "Yeah." He then put the knife away and left the store. Edits. Just to clarify, a JoJo is basically a deep-fried potato wedge. They were very popular where I grew up. I guess there are other names for them in other parts of the country, but where I grew up, we called them JoJos, and you ordered them by weight. For example, you would say, "Give me a half pound of JoJo's." Also, as far as I know, the guy never got caught. I called the police and described the guy, but never heard from them again, so I assume he got away. The burrito bandito could still be roaming the streets. And thanks for the gold, kind burrito-loving soul. It's official. My highest rated comment ever is about nearly being stabbed over a burrito. A guy came in to buy beer after hours. Told him I couldn't sell. It was against the law. He pulled out a badge, said, "I am the law." I called 911 and a cop shows up. Tells me if I can just let it go, I wouldn't have any more problems. I let it go. 2 weeks later, driving home late at night, way over the speed limit, I got pulled over. It was cop number 2. He came up to the car, recognized me, said, "Slow down," and left. I used to work the graveyard at a gas station near my place. A pretty normal night. Clean, stock smokes, clean again, sit behind the counter. A woman came in about mid-30s with a little boy with her. She was in tears and her clothes were torn a bit. She came up and asked to use the phone. When she got off without getting an answer, she asked to stay here for a bit. I told her it would be no problem. About 20 minutes go by, and I wound up giving her and her kid free drinks and one of the sandwiches we have on the hot rack. She was in the store for about 30 minutes until her, quote, boyfriend came in and found her and her kid. He was pretty calm at first, but then started screaming at her and telling her she needs to come with him. Luckily, before anything crazy happened, a cruiser pulled up to the front and 2 cops came in and intervened. He was arrested right there. I guess he had been beating her in front of her kid and she was trying to run away. I'm glad I got to keep her away from harm for at least a little bit. It was a scary night. Let's see. Closed the store to play hockey on the roof. Had a guy come in and, quote, inspect individual eggs in each carton until he found the perfect egg. Had an old guy who asked to use our bathroom, but first he needed reading material and asked for an adult mag from behind the counter. But when we gave it to him, he said he didn't like that one and asked for a different one. Then he died while taking a crap. You know, normal stuff like that. I actually used to work retail for a couple months. Craziest interaction I ever had was a guy who came up to me and started striking up conversation, but what he said really stuck out to me. He said, "You should subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below." I just kinda nodded and thanked him for watching. Some people. Huge guy comes in and asks to use the restroom. No big deal. I'm not one to stand in the way of nature. Well, maybe 20 minutes later, guy comes out in a huff and says, "Dude, I'm really sorry. I screwed up your toilet. It's all good, man. I'll get it." Not really needing spectators while I cleaned crap, I expect the guy to shrug his shoulders and walk off. Well, he looks back into the back where the restroom is with a look of disgusting concern and says, "Man, it's really coming out. Like, it's coming out into the back room." I rush back, thinking I've got to at least stop this from becoming some kind of biohazard event. I round the corner and there's nothing, but I can smell an unholy, overwhelming stench. I continue back, expecting to ruin my shoes at any moment until I reach the men's room. At this point, I've had to cover my face with my shirt and focus on breathing through my mouth, but I reach the door with no issue. Frustrated from the mind-numbing odor alone, I push the men's room door open, ready for at least an inch of gas station dukes all over the floor. As the door swings forward, I see nothing but water filling my eyes and the black/brown human paint the fat jerk left against the back of the bowl. Ticked to the point of rushing out, fully intending on asking this rotten jerk what the deal was, I round the corner again to see his big, poop-eating grin spread across his face. Stinks, huh? TLDR, got jigsawed in the breathing in noxious fumes. I worked at a 24/7 gas station in a small college town. One night, the club across the street had a fight break out and about 50 people were pepper sprayed by the police when they responded at about 1:30 a.m. 5 minutes later, cue 50 angry clubgoers bursting into the store, running to the dairy cooler, dousing themselves in milk, and then running back out. I just stood there in utter confusion and then told my boss I didn't want the late shift anymore. Edit, man, I really missed out on an amusing pun with utter confusion, huh? Not a late night clerk, as my store closes at 9, but some pretty strange things have happened. In no particular order, a woman tried to tell me that Jesus could talk to her through her eyes and that we were all going to hell. A man came in for no reason other than to take a dump in aisle 3. Some guy tried to come in and steal cigarettes from behind our counter and may have gotten away with it if he had not then tried to buy cigarettes with the other ones stuffed down his shirt. 2 different people have tried to lock themselves in our bathroom and tell us that that was their home now. Once a week, someone will try to buy our entire cereal aisle, just pulling entire displays off the shelf and trying to do it as quickly as possible, like getting into a line is some sort of free pass and we have to let them buy the stuff. An ex-employee one time came back in after hours as we were closing down stuff for the night and started to work. She was behind the deli counter just cutting meat, talking to invisible customers. We later found out she was high on pills. A guy got locked in our bathroom freezer after hours. We only knew he was there because he escaped and broke a window that set off our alarms. That was the first time we replaced the giant display windows. The second time was right after we had just shut down for the night. Kids on bikes threw rocks through our windows. The sound was terrifying. Even though we had them on camera, the store never pressed charges. Story time. In high school, I worked at a little mom-and-pop department store. We sold odds and ends at super high prices, and they eventually went out of business when I was a couple of years into college. Anyway, one night I was working a closing shift, and that involved shutting down the registers, turning off all the lights, etc. We had just stocked these baby doll toys on the shelf that day, those motion-sensing ones that giggled and cooed when you got close to them. Well, the lights turning off must have triggered them, because after the first chunk goes out, we hear coos. Second chunk goes out, giggles. Third chunk goes out, and we hear, "Islam is the light!" Needless to say, we whipped those suckers back to the manufacturer. They didn't know about the propaganda babies because they only said that phrase randomly, so it must have gotten past whatever testing process they had. Very freaky to hear in a dark store at night. I watched a truck pull up to one of our pumps. Guy gets out to pump gas. A Durango comes hauling it from the back of the building. Another guy gets out with a gun aimed at the first guy. I was on the phone with a friend of mine and said, "Someone just pulled a gun at the pump. I'm gonna have to let you go." I called the cops. Turned out the guy pumping gas had robbed a store 3 towns over, and the Durango was an undercover cop who had been in pursuit. Another time, a guy came in, walked to the back cooler, got a can of Sprite, and came to the register to check out. As I'm ringing him up, one of our local cops walks in, gun drawn, says, "Put your hands on the counter, put your hands on the counter now." Well, I put my hands on the counter along with the customer because all I'm thinking is, I have no idea what I've done, but I'm very sorry for it. Turned out that guy had been involved with the robbery of a convenience store in the next town, 5 minutes away, and had fled in a Mustang with 2 other individuals. They wrecked the car trying to evade the cops. All 3 dispersed, 2 were apprehended pretty quickly, but the third came into the store to either blend in or rob me. I honestly don't know which. After the festivities and them hauling the guy away, the cop told me he had almost lost it when I put my hands on the counter too, and that I should really rethink working closing shifts at my age. I was 19 at the time, and I am female. I laughed and I was like, "Give up free entertainment?" Edit. First story to clarify, the undercover cop jumped out of the Durango with the gun pointed at the suspect. Graveyard shift at a gas station. Full serve gets shut down after 11 p.m. because there's only 1 clerk on site. Traffic cones block the full serve pumps, signs inform the customer. Around midnight, a van pulls up with California plates and peace love signs in the windows. Woman gets out, moves the traffic cones, and pulls up to full serve. I use the intercom to tell her that she will have to use self-serve if she wants gas. No answer. I go to the door and try to wave her over or call out to her. Can't see any sign of her. I shrug and go back inside. I'm not allowed to leave the store unattended, so there's not much I can do. 10 minutes later, a woman gets out of the van and comes in. "I've been waiting for service for over an hour," she says. I decide not to argue about the time elapsed and just say, "I'm very sorry, ma'am, but we don't offer full serve after 11. Perhaps you noticed the traffic cones and signs to that effect? You expect to pump my own gas?" she says. Again, I'm sorry. I'd be happy to help you, but I can't leave the store unattended. I appreciate your understanding. She snorts and digs a 20 out of her purse and tosses it on the counter. She goes out, moves the van to self-serve, pumps the gas. Then she comes back. "May I use your restroom, please?" she asks. "Absolutely. Right back there," I say, relieved. She goes to the restroom, and she's in there for about 15 minutes. I start to worry. Finally, she comes out and comes to the counter. "I know all about you," she says. You're the one who brought the Black Plague. You brought it all the time forever. It was always you. You caused all those deaths, all that suffering. Did you like hearing the babies wail and scream? I bet you loved it. All the demons love it. That's you. You're a demon. You are evil. I can tell. And I'll tell you something else. You skunk me up, I'll skunk you back. I stared at her, retreating back, speechless. She got in her van and drove away. Skunk her up? Because I didn't pump her gas? Weird. I went back to fronting shelves for about 30 seconds before I thought, perhaps I should check the bathroom. I walked back and pushed open the door. Poop. Poop everywhere. On the walls, the floor, the mirror, the sink, all over the toilet lid and the tank, crap on the door, clearly smeared by hand. And oh, the stench. As I turned to get the cleaning supplies, I muttered under my breath, "You skunked me back, all right. Yes, you did." I worked through my college years at a grocery store in a college town. I worked in the deli/bakery and daytime cashier. One night, I was asked to work the late shift for time and a half. I didn't have class the next day, so heck yeah. It was a night I'll never forget. As I was transitioning from day to late night shift around 9 p.m., a kid came in and started just eating olives off the deli bar with his bare hands. Cops get called. He is found 5 minutes later assaulting the soda machine outside, screaming and crying at the same time. Then arrested while high on what was probably PCP or meth. A plethora of drunk sorority and frat jerks pouring in between midnight and 3 a.m. trying to buy alcohol when they were already wasted. The town had a bus system that ran all over the place for free, and we were a very central stop. Had to call a, quote, code wood to summon our late-night stalker who was indeed built like a tree trunk. Some punks wanted to steal some fillies and demanded to, quote, just hold on to them while they shopped, then got confrontational when I wouldn't give the fillies to them before paying. For clarification, since I'm a terrible writer, Wood was a night stockman who probably went to bodybuilding competitions on the weekends. Hence, I was calling him to the front to help me deal with the hooligans until the police could show up. After the cops showed up with their canine from said confrontation, she decided to hang out and talk to me for a while. She showed me a bunch of fake IDs she collected. Insomniac Kid kept coming into the store to buy food and smokes. The street sweeper guys showed up around 5 a.m. to clean the lot. They had to come inside to use the restroom. In that amount of time, their street sweeper got stolen because they left the keys in and running. Not sure if they ever got it back, but I imagine it will be hard to hide in a small college town. TLDR, what was a highly functional, prestigious college town got rather seedy at night. I also spent a lot of time reading, but I don't suppose people came here to read about my Asimov novel. Edit, Phillies are a cigarillo/blunt used to smoke weed, usually in a party scenario. They are commonly shoplifted after normal business hours. Thus, they are kept behind the counter so they are not easily accessed. Back from my days working graveyard shift at a grocery store. Let's see what I can remember. Had a former employee come in drunk one night and call the cops on himself for shoplifting because he wanted somewhere to sleep that night. Had an employee come in on a night off all ticked off, proceeds to walk straight to the back room without a word. About 10 minutes later, there was a successive loud pop, 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 pop. Turns out he climbed up to the roof to fire his gun. A customer came up and told me he heard something fall down in the back room. Tons of stoners buying ice cream at 2 a.m. Meth heads buying Brillo pads and ammonia after 3 a.m. Bars closed at 2 a.m., so all the cops were usually gone from the area by around 3. Saw a drunk guy fall asleep while his car idled along in the parking lot. Luckily, he hit a curb and no damage was done, but the cops got a good laugh out of that one. A tall, drunk Russian guy tries to buy beer after the 2 a.m. legal cutoff time, then proceeds to pick on a sober customer half his size. The little guy took one swing and broke the Russian dude's nose. Had a guy come in when another employee was taking a dump. I'm so sorry that there's so much poop in this episode, I have no idea why. Guy really had to take a dump, so we turned around and took a dump at the urinal, asking the employee on the toilet for toilet paper. In high school, I worked at a 24-hour pharmacy which also had a small selection of beer. At about 2 a.m., this guy walks in 3 sheets to the wind, saunters over to the beer, and grabs 2 12-packs. He comes up to the counter and slams the beer down, reaches into his pocket, and pulls out a half-eaten taco and puts it on the counter. I couldn't say anything because I was so perplexed. I just let him walk out with the beer and told my bosses I thought he might have a gun also. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. A couple weeks later, he apparently tried this at the family-owned gas station across the street and got shot. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts. Every Tuesday night at about 8:45, a guy would come in. A guy in Daisy Dukes and a sequined bikini top. He was balding, had a beer gut, and chest hair. He would strut his stuff to the counter and order 2 sprinkled donuts. every Tuesday. Honestly, I aspire to that level of confidence. Used to work third shift overnight in a Texaco 20 years ago. One night, this guy in a bright yellow Mustang comes in to buy gas and beer. I run his credit card, and the register flags it for being stolen. So I tell the guy, your car won't work. Says I have to keep it. So the guy kind of freaks out, leaves his beer, then hops in his car and speeds off. I call the cops because he already pumped his gas and left without paying for it. So later, I walk home at 6 a.m. I lived only a 5-minute walk away. As I'm walking, I see the yellow Mustang parked at an apartment complex across from the street from my house. So I go back to work and call the cops again, explaining that I know where the guy lives. Presumably, after that they found him and arrested him or whatever. A few days later, I had to do a friend a favor and take her to visit her boyfriend, who was in jail at the time. On our way out of the jail, some guy walks up to her to bum a cigarette off of her. It was the guy with the yellow Mustang. I sped up to walk ahead of them, so hopefully he wouldn't recognize my face. She gives him a cigarette, and he proceeds to complain about how he got arrested because he found a credit card, so of course he was going to buy some gas and beer with it. He didn't recognize me, so I remain unmurdered. 911 operators. What is that one call that you can never forget? Many of these stories will be sad and graphic. Viewer discretion is advised. Harley motorcycle tipped over and the clutch lever went into a 4-year-old's eye. Parent was on the line asking what to do. Suddenly, she said, "They're going to lift the motorcycle." I emphatically told her to tell them to stop and wait for rescue and EMS. Rescue ended up cutting off the clutch lever and transporting the kid to the hospital. She underwent surgery. That was 1982. Just last year, I met the lead rescue officer and the girl herself, now fully grown. They wanted to meet the 911 operator that saved her vision. I'm a dispatcher for a cab company. One day, I got a call from an old man who seemed as if his voice was trembling. I'm naturally polite, as I asked for his drop-off address. He said, the emergency room. I casually said, "Feeling a little under the weather, eh?" And he responded, "I tried to take my life. I vomited most of the pills up, and now I feel miserable. Can you send a cab quick?" "Certainly, sir. Anything else I can do for you?" I talked to him for 15 minutes before the cab pulled up and the driver carried him out to his car. He told me his life story and why he tried to end it. I visited him in the hospital as soon as my shift was over. He still calls for a cab every day to take him to a barbecue restaurant. I had a call that started out pretty dumb but was actually pretty serious. 911, where's your emergency? 123 Main Street. Okay, what's going on there? I'd like to order a pizza for delivery. Oh great, another prank call. Ma'am, you've reached 911. Yeah, I know. Can I have a large with half pepperoni, half mushroom and peppers? I'm sorry, you know you've called 911, right? Yeah, do you know how long it'll be? Okay, ma'am, is everything okay over there? Do you have an emergency? Yes, I do. And you can't talk about it because there's someone in the room with you? Moment of realization. Yes, that's correct. Do you know how long it'll be? I have an officer about a mile from your location. Are there any weapons in your house? No. Can you stay on the phone with me? Nope. See you soon. Thanks. As we dispatch the call, I check the history at the address and see there are multiple previous domestic violence calls. The officer arrives and finds a couple. Female was kind of banged up, and the boyfriend was drunk. Officer arrests him after she explains that the boyfriend had been beating her for a while. I thought she was pretty clever to use that trick. Definitely one of the most memorable calls. I'm not a 911 operator, but I spent time doing OnStar/telematics type stuff, and the moments you remember are those when you're still connected to the vehicle once the dispatch has been made after an accident. I've heard a brother beg for his other brother not to die as he bled out. Not sure if he actually did. The one that has stuck with me the most is the one I initially heard the least on. Airbag signal connected to a vehicle. I heard a sigh and then silence outside. Nothing but the sounds of passing traffic. A coworker then completes the dispatch, standard procedure, and I attempt to make a contact a time or two with no luck. It's simply a matter of remaining on the line to listen to make sure the ambulance gets there. Then, a car stops, and I hear talking in the background. Soon after, someone else stops. Finally, someone starts the last rites type of prayer after asking someone to join hands. I realized then that what I heard at the very beginning of the call was their last breath. The only time that this person's entire existence crossed mine was at the last possible moment, and they don't even know it. Life is fickle. Be good to everyone. I was a 911 dispatcher for several years, and one of my most memorable calls was a hysterical woman at about midnight one stormy night. She was absolutely incomprehensible. I kept saying, "Ma'am, you have to calm down. I can't understand you. Ma'am." This went on for what felt like forever. I couldn't get anything useful out of her. My officers were en route to this obviously horrifying situation. Finally, she said something about being with her sister. "How old is your sister?" 1. Instantly suspicious, I asked, "How old are you?" 5. A 5-year-old boy. So that's how I inadvertently called a little boy ma'am many times. Oops. The storm had woken him up and his parents were gone. They went out to move their cars to shelter in case of hail. He was just very scared. My officers still responded and talked to the parents about not leaving sleeping children alone, but everybody was unscathed. It wasn't my most tragic call, but it is one I've never forgotten. Poor little ma'am. Just a reminder that if you like what you're hearing, remember to subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. Thanks for watching. My first call I ever had to dispatch on the radio. 2 homeless dudes blowing each other on the bus. I'm sorry it's not serious or traumatic, but it'll always stay with me. I used to work as a relay operator, 711, and often got misdialed 911 calls. We would connect them to 911, but since they connected through us, we had to stay on the line. One time, I got an old woman who fell out of bed and couldn't get up. I connected her to 911, and from there they tracked her location. The 911 operator is like, "Ma'am, are you in such and such hospital? Are you calling from the hospital?" "Yes, I fell and no one will help me." Not sure what the 911 operator did, but about 10 minutes later, you hear someone come into her room to help her up. Apparently, this woman fell out of her hospital bed and no one noticed for over an hour until she dragged herself to the phone and called 911. I was like, note to self, never go to this hospital. 911 dispatcher here. I took a call once of a house being on fire, so of course we send the fire department out. Soon as they arrive on the scene, they ask for the police to respond. Police don't typically respond to this area with the fire department. Turns out the story was that a girl's fiancé arrives home and dumps gas on her and lights her on fire. She then runs to the shower to try to put herself out. He follows her, turns the shower off, dumps more gas on her, and lights her back on fire. She then runs through the house, thereby lighting the house on fire. She then runs out of the house as the fire department arrives on scene. So when FD pulled up, they had arrived to a body collapsed in the yard on fire. When PD arrives, the male fiancé walks out of the burning house, lets himself into the back of a police car, and says, "Take me to jail." My mom was a 911 dispatcher for over 30 years. She had many crazy calls, but one story she told me always stuck out from the rest. One day, a man called in. With a calm voice, he told my mom he was in a local hotel and that he had doused himself with gasoline and was going to end his life. He called in so they could evacuate the hotel because, quote, "I don't want to hurt anyone else." While my mom is trying to talk him out of it, she is on another line to the hotel letting them know what's going on and to get everyone out. While emergency services are en route, she has to stay on the line whenever possible to keep people calm, reassure them help is on the way, and to try her best to keep track of what's up on the other end. As soon as the guy heard the sirens coming in the distance, he asked her if everyone had been evacuated yet. She tried to stall her answer, thinking he'd light himself up as soon as she said yes. Didn't work. Seconds later, she stated hearing the worst screams she's ever heard, and she's heard many during that job over the years, and the phone went static, and then silence. He died in that hotel and mom had to listen. Lousy day. I wasn't a 911 operator, but a supervisor for AT&T's 00 info directory information. Think 411. While remotely listening in on some agents one evening, one particular call was escalated to Tier 2 for assistance. On the other end of the line was a woman who was hysterical, saying her husband was trying to kill her. Protocol dictates that we trace the number to the local LEC, local exchange carrier, and notify law enforcement in that area. We do this, but we had no way to connect the call to the local sheriff dispatch. Silly, I know, but we technically weren't true operators, and our equipment didn't support that functionality. Basically, we had to act as a relay between the LEO and the victim on the phone. By this time, I had moved from my office to seat myself next to the Tier 2 agent to help her keep her cool while everything was going down. The agent, let's call her April, because that was her name, was handling the call very well at first, but started to lose her mind as the call progressed. While listening in on the call next to April and trying to convey what is going on to the LEO at the other line, we hear the woman who initially called in say, "He went to get an axe. Ma'am, where are you now? I'm locked in the bathroom. Please hurry." The sheriff's office is on their way. They say they are 5 minutes out. Then, we hear loud banging on the door. Her husband was trying to chop his way through the door with the axe. April lost it when she heard the woman start screaming, knowing her husband was coming after her with an axe. She threw her headset off and walked away, saying something like, "I can't do it, Lucky Ink, I can't." April heads off to the ladies' room to collect herself. So I pick up the headset to reassure the lady on the phone. "Ma'am, the sheriff is at your house now. Where is your husband?" "Back bathroom. He's at the door." More loud banging from the axe. By this time, the woman was overly hysterical and crying madly. Then, "Sheriff's Department, drop the axe." "Sheriff's Department, drop the axe." Pop, 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 pop. The local LEO dispatch directed me to ask the lady to open the bathroom door, and she does. The next voice I heard on her phone was a sheriff deputy. All he said was this: "The situation is under control, operator. Disengage the call." I still get chills and all teary thinking about it. Hi guys, I actually am a 911 operator. First ever 911 I answered was about a naked man sitting in a bathtub on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. He was drunk, and we still don't know where he got the tub. Edit, West Tennessee, since everyone keeps asking. The one that stayed with me gave childbirth instructions to a deaf father via relay for his deaf wife. They were the victims of a home invasion and were tied to chairs. Burglars saw her in labor, panicked, then left. Took Dad hours to free himself and call. While giving the instructions, I obtained a suspect description to put out to surrounding agencies. They were caught in the city to our north during the call. Baby boy was born perfectly healthy. I worked in a call center a few years ago. Not for 911, but for general purchases for car parts. Anyway, some guy phones me asking for a car part, find the part number, and place the order as I would normally do. I then hear him sigh and begin to cry. Naturally, I ask if everything is okay, and his response is, "You don't want to listen to my problems, mate." Me being a kind guy who wanted to get rid of some of his shift, I said, "Sure, what's up?" and ended up having so many feels. Turns out his wife had motor neuron disease and had very recently passed away, and he was fixing up her car to sell it on. He said it got to the stage where she couldn't walk, then couldn't speak, couldn't do basic tasks such as dress herself or shower, etc. Eventually, she didn't even recognize his face, and the disease ultimately took her. He then tells me about how he has to move house as he can't stand to be in the property without his wife anymore, and that he had 80,000 pounds worth of pills in a drawer that he had nothing to do with. He said he'll probably donate them to charity. Anyway, after about a 50-minute conversation with him, he was so glad that he asked for the company address. Now, I was new on the job, so I didn't realize the dangers of disclosing this information, but I gave it to him, and that Christmas, I received a card from him saying thanks for taking the time to listen to him, and that it really helped him get through a tough time just speaking to someone about it. So yeah, he was such a nice guy, and I'll remember him for the rest of my days because he really made an impact on me with the story. TLDR, guy orders car parts, cries, I proceed to have so many feels. Edit, oh my goodness, first gold, thank you so much. I honestly never expected such a great response. Edit 2, relearning about motor neuron disease and having so many flashbacks of the guy's explanation as to what it does exactly, etc. Wouldn't wish this upon your worst enemy. Edit 3, I'd like to thank everyone for all the nice comments and PMs I'm receiving. Also, the hourly rate for the car part therapist has increased from free to £150 per hour. I'm actually a police call taker. Throwaway because it's about time I made one and because confidentiality. But sorry, the reason you're not getting many real answers is because we can't talk about much. Got a call just yesterday on the non-emergency line from a very old, very proud German-Canadian man who just babbled on for 5 minutes straight about having come to Canada before World War II in a boat with windows and helped build Canada and loved Harper and he built skyscrapers and was a plumber and blah 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 and would not be interrupted. I just sat back on mute and laughed my butt off. When I finally went to kick him off the line, he finished with, "Long live AmITheA! Long live Canada! I love everybody! I love this place!" Yes, I know my accent is bad. Before my grandma died, we had to call 911 to get her to the hospital. An older lady, for some reason still an EMT, or first responder, I forgot, came to the house. She had trouble getting up all the stairs to the front door and fell backwards. She thought she hit her head, so she touched it and saw blood all over her palm. In reality, she just scraped her hands, but thought the blood was from her head, so she fainted. We had to call another ambulance. So, as a med student, I worked as an emergency phone operator for night shifts. One unusually quiet night, I had a call at about 3 a.m. A nice old lady was asking for just somebody to talk to because she had insomnia and just woke up from a terrible nightmare. Now, usually I was angry when something like this happened. People calling in the middle of the night for some BS that clearly isn't a medical emergency. But this old woman was so sweet and polite that I decided to just have a nice talk with her. Also, all the other lines were quiet at the time. She told me her name and that ever since her husband was sent to a nursing home several weeks ago, she was afraid that something terrible might happen to him. About 1 hour ago, she awoke and just felt that something bad had happened, and now she felt so anxious and alone at home, just wanted to hear a human voice, someone to talk to. She kept excusing herself for calling in the middle of the night and wasting my time. And then I got a call on the second line. It was the nursing home where her husband was sent. Yo, we got a dead here. Died 1 hour ago. Send over the doctor for a death certificate. Needless to say, the man who just died had the same last name as the nice lady I had been talking to. I am a 911 operator. My favorite call I personally took that I won't forget is about a couple at McDonald's. They had just purchased a new vehicle and went out to celebrate the purchase at a local McDonald's. The wife, for some reason, decided she had better check the spare tire and make sure they had one before they left town, and found a gun instead. I received a call from the wife stating she just accidentally shot her husband. When I was asking about exit wounds, she said it did not penetrate but burned him real badly. Turns out, wife shot the husband with a flare gun when she went to show it to him. They did not finish their Big Macs, and I'm not sure how that marriage ended up. He wasn't a happy man on the way to the emergency room to get burn treatment. Former Sheriff's Department dispatcher in charge of non-emergency and 911 calls for a rural southern county. I picked up the job part-time and was in the process of training. My supervisor was sitting next to me listening to my end of the call, but she was not hooked into the line to hear the whole call. Line rings, I answer. It's 911. A young girl, less than 10 years old, is telling me that she, her mother, and her baby sibling are locked in a bedroom. Her uncle is pacing around outside the door holding a knife and threatening to kill them all. She does not know the house number/fire number where they are, and mom is basically checked out of the conversation out of fear. I have a vague idea of where she is, so I send deputies in her direction with the promise that I will get better directions. As is typical in rural areas, everybody owned a scanner and listened like it was their job. My phone starts ringing off the hook, so I am reassuring this little girl on one headset and holding a second headset up to my other ear taking directions from concerned members of the public. Directions like, go until you see a broke-down truck. Keep going. When you get to the second broke-down truck, turn right and continue until you see a large rock. It was also late enough in the evening that everything was dark out. The little girl tells me there might be a back door that is unlocked. Members of the public who know the house just from the general location and number/gender of occupants are calling in confirming that there is a back door that my deputy should enter through and that they will not be seen by the perpetrator if he has retreated to the living room. My guys arrive, sneak in the back, walk right up to the guy sitting in a recliner, disarm him, and arrest him. Family gets emergency protective orders so he, ideally, cannot be a threat to them again. I almost quit after that call because my adrenaline was running. I was shaking, and I'd had to handle it mostly myself because my supervisor couldn't hear what was going on. I stayed with it, and it was one of the best jobs I had. I quit when I moved to another state, but it was a sad decision to make. Edit. I would like to add that the whole not being able to find your house in the country thing was extremely common back then, and I cannot speak to current systems in rural areas. I also got extensive public help via scanner listeners the time a home security company called to report a possible break-in or medical emergency, but they only had a billing address on file, no directions to the house whatsoever. If you have any kind of company servicing your home, make sure they have your actual street address/fire number and a backup detailed set of directions to your home, including landmarks. I don't want to ever see anyone in an easily preventable emergency because ADP doesn't have the details necessary to send someone to your home. Allow me to offer a funny story in place of these serious ones. I was an intern at a local police department and I was working with dispatch for the day. We received a call from a concerned citizen complaint. 911, what is your emergency? I'm sorry, ma'am. Could you please speak up? I said there's 2 guys screwing in a parked truck. Yes, ma'am. We'll get someone out there immediately. The operator hung up and we both immediately started laughing. He had the caller on speaker so I could listen. I asked him if he was going to send someone out there, and he just shrugged and told me sometimes people need some fun. Edit, my newest, most upvoted comment is about butt stuff. Nice. Edit 2, I should talk about butt stuff more often on Reddit. Edit 3, gold for talking about butt stuff. Reddit, I love you so very much. And thank you, most kind and generous stranger. I have much love for you as well. Not an actual 911 call, but I did get a 911 call while working at a tattoo shop. A customer calls me, gives me his address, tells me to not ask questions, come over, don't knock, but rather break a window and come on in. What I find is him and his girlfriend were on the bed doggy style. I say, whoa, I don't mind the show, but I'm not sure if I want to join. Turns out they had gotten their piercings caught. The bar at the base of his had gotten caught in her hoop. Not a 911 operator, but Grandma was a telephone operator back in the day when operators actually connected calls. First call ever on first day on the job. Kid zipped his junk in a zipper. She said she could hear the kids screaming in the background. So, she put it through to the fire department because, quote, I figured they were all guys there, so they know what to do. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.